Hey guys, how are you all beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is next part of Godlike Hokage in Naruto. The Gura Gura no Mi is known as the strongest fruit in the world of One Piece. In Naruto world, the blood limit would grant the strongest power for those ninjas. But what if the Gura Gura no Mi is found in the world of Naruto and after it is eaten it will be like a blood limit power? Well, the MC just took that fruit. This story begins before the Second Ninja War by 2 years. So let's start without any delay. From the first step he took in the battlefield, Naito managed to kill the whole members of the surprising squad. Konoha's ninjas looked so shocked from Naito's power, but this shock fired up their spirit and made their morale rise dramatically. While the surprising squad is gone now, Konoha's shinobis were so confident that they can win this war even if Naito didn't fight. In the distance, Sando, who was in the middle of a fierce battle, couldn't help but shout, "Damn!" When he first saw Naito entering the battlefield, he wanted to rush and stop him, but he got blocked by Sakumo, and could no longer pass. The Anbu next to him was faster, and could easily pass through Sakumo while he's focusing on Sando, but once he's gone, Sando, who lost his arm, would be easily killed by Sakumo. Looking at the situation on the battlefield, Sakumo looked relieved by Naito's arrival. Naito finally came. The outcome of the war has already been determined. However, when he looked back at Sando, the last didn't look like he was even worried. On the contrary, the look on his face when he took a glance at Naito was the look of seeing a dead man walking. Just as he managed to wipe out the whole members of the surprising squad, the heat of the war once again exploded. Holding his chakra sword, Sakumo waved it so hard, pushing back Sando and the other Anbu. It must be said that Sakumo should have been one of the strongest shinobis of his time if he didn't end up suiciding in the original story. On the battlefield, Naito stood up and set his sight on the other rock's shinobis. The stare in his eyes was very cold. Suddenly, Naito rushed over toward the nearest shinobi at high speed. Whoosh! In no time, Naito pulled out the Kusanagi sword and struck down the shinobi. In an instant, the blood splashed, and the whole body of the shinobi got cut into 2 halves. Naito's figure was flashing everywhere in the battlefield, smashing, cutting, and destroying everything that comes in its way. It didn't matter if he was a Chunin or even a Jonin, no one could stop him. No defense. Under the leadership of Naito, Konoha momentum continued on raising, and finally, they managed to overwhelm the rocks suppressing. This is also surprised the squad of Anbu that were fighting with Sando against Sakumo. They weren't present in the last war, they only heard about Naito's power from Sando. But now, after they've witnessed it by themselves, they understood that Sando wasn't exaggerating. That guy is really strong. He's simply like a killing machine. Holding his Kusanagi sword, Naito was everywhere, and the single thing they could see is his sword waving and cutting their allies. And if there's anyone who dares to attack him, Naito's other hand was always ready to shatter any kind of attacks with a punch. Yet Naito was also facing a lot of clones. Everyone was using this technique to distract Naito and win some time to regroup. Naito was so lazy to focus on the real ones, he was just destroying everything on his way. It was really impossible to stop him anyway, so he just continued on destroying everything. And in general, those clones were getting destroyed the moment he came near them by his passive shocks that he was using around his body. It was basically like a tremor aura. This is one of the reasons that makes him unstoppable in these kinds of situation. He is a monster. Every single one of them wanted to kill him. The killing intent was so tense, that he could even feel it around this whole madness of the battlefield. Yet it didn't have any effect on Naito. But at that moment, he felt another strong intent around him, and couldn't help but stop. Who is this? Although he wasn't sure who was this person, Naito was so sure that this person must be strong. This feeling of hatred and killing intent was clearly meant to Naito. This is extremely dangerous. At the next moment, Naito finally knew who this person was. It was the one who didn't engage the battle last time thanks to Sakumo. Suddenly, two thick walls raised from the ground and trapped Naito in the middle, blocking him from moving. Dust release. These two words had the intention of the whole battlefield. Dust release. Did the Tsuchikage engage the battlefield? At that moment, it was already too late to think of why the Tsuchikage decided to attack Naito, instead of Sakumo, because the dust technique was completed, and the moment it touches him, he will get wiped out. The rock walls that were blocking him from moving, could easily break with a punch from Naito. But the dust technique was already falling from the sky toward Naito. If he destroys the walls first, he won't have time to escape from it. This is really a clever trap. In the sky, the Tsuchikage was already floating there, looking down at Naito, with very cold eyes. He looked at him as if he was already a dead man. Damn you Konoha's imp, go to hell already. He didn't have any mercy. Onoki was already confident that his technique gonna turn him into dust. Looking up at the sky, watching the dust technique falling toward him at a very high speed, Naito looked very calm. He didn't have any fear in his heart. Naito's eyes were shining with confidence. Nothing changed. Naito was still confident in his blood limit. The earthquake release can destroy everything. The dust release had the ability to turn everything into dust. Which one will be stronger? Naito aura burst out the whole space around him as he was clenching his fist so hard, charging up his full power into one punch. The blood in his veins was boiling, and suddenly a smile appeared on his face. Naito was actually enjoying this. The space around Naito was cracking so hard. Let's see which one is the strongest. Suddenly Naito punched the space, targeting the dust technique in the sky. Boom! With one punch, space broke like a mirror, and it spread out toward the sky. This dangerous situation made Naito break his limit and send his strongest punch up until now. Crack! The power of the shock blasted, even though he was targeting the sky, but all the shinobis from both sides on the ground felt a violent and robust force hitting them. Around Naito, a bunch of shinobis who wanted to take advantage of the situation and attack him got suddenly shocked so strong until they got completely crashed. But at this moment, nothing of that was important. What was important was the shock force and the dust technique that were about to crash into each other. Finally, the two forces collided. When the power of the dust and the shock force collided, it didn't cause any sound. There was no roaring or reverberating. However, their collides caused a big light that seemed like it illuminated the distance between the earth and heaven. Whoom! Everyone in the field looked at the sky. The light was so strong and dazzling, that it seemed like a star. Everyone was terrified from this scene. The light became stronger, and they couldn't help but close their eyes. They could no longer look straight to the sky. At that moment, the light immersion everything, it looked like it turned the whole place into a void, and this is caused to stop the movements across the entire battlefield. That light was so strong that it blocked the vision on the sky, and they could no longer even see the clouds and the sun. It illuminated the whole ground and sky. Even the people in the nearby towns could see it, even the shinobis of the rain in a far distance could see it. What is that? At this moment, Hanzo the salamander frowned when he saw the light. The light seemed like it replaced the light of the sun itself. What a shocking scene! In the end, the light start to fade away and both the shadows of Onoki and Naito start to emerge again. Naito didn't retract his punch and stood there like if he was targeting the whole sky. Onoki was still maintaining his stance as he was holding the whole sky, yet his expression looked very confused. He never expected that his dust power could be stopped by Naito's shocks. The dust. He's able to block it. Onoki's heart was full fear. There's a lot of people in his life who managed to avoid his dust, but no one ever could block it. He was sure that he could destroy everything up until this moment. It's a known fact that Onoki was possessing the strongest blood limit. In the original story, Onoki's dust managed even to wipe away Madara's uncompleted Susanoo. Even Madara wouldn't be able to stop it if he wasn't using the Rinnegan ability Geikid. What a shocking scene! The dust release was created first by the second Tsuchikage Mua. The power of this release is well known, even the rock's Shine Abyss knew how strong it is. It's a fact that the dust release is the strongest blood limit. But now, it was blocked by Naito. Every single one in the field was shocked. The Tsuchikage dust got blocked. This is impossible. There shouldn't be a blood limit stronger than the Tsuchikage's. All the rock's Shinpo had a dull gaze on their faces. Under the horror they were feeling, their bodies were shaking, and even their tones were revealing their fear. Although most of Konoha's ninjas at the time didn't know this information and how strong the dust release is, but when they heard and saw the rock's Shinobi's expression, they got so shocked. The Tsuchikage. He's one of the 5 Kages, and he's one of the strongest Shinobis in the world. His figure was smaller than Naito, but in fact, he was the Kage of the Rock Village, and he was standing at the top of the ninja world. Such a man was blocked by Naito even though he used a sneak attack. Everyone on the field could no longer breathe normally. Zizi. In the battlefield, the reflection that caused from the collide from the two forces didn't stop. The cracks were still spreading out as the dust was still getting blocked by the shock, but it was slowly fading, while the reflection of the shocks on the battlefield was still trembling it. In the sky, Onoki was still maintaining his stance while he was looking all shocked at Naito. Finally his expression changed. This kid must die. At such an age, he managed to block his dust. If he grows up later, what else he will do? Onoki revealed a very strong killing intent. He bit his teeth, then he madly started to mobilize his chakra and injecting it into his hand. The dust release is, of course, can be used several times as long as the user still have chakra. The power is really great, but as the consumption of the chakra, it far beyond the consumption of normal blood limit, but he had only one thing in his mind. Is to be sure to kill Naito. The amount of Onoki's chakra was already on the level of a Kage. Naito wasn't sure which one had a bigger one, Onoki or Mua. But no doubt, the two of them were at the level of a Kage. This is the problem. Onoki was at the peak of his power, while Naito was only on the 3rd stage of his shock force. The moment Onoki decided to wipe out Naito from the ground with all of his power, a figure rushed over from the ground to the sky. There was no flashing light, but the movement was so fast that almost no one noticed him. Then with his full power, he waved his sword toward Onoki. It was Konoha's White Fang. Even Onoki couldn't deal with him while he was trying to attack Naito, so he dispatched the dust release and fell back. Whoosh! Suddenly, a cut appeared on Onoki's neck. The dispatched dust went all the way down, but it wasn't that strong. Naito once again sent a shock wave toward it. Boom! And once again, the nearby ninjas got shocked by Naito's punch. In just a short period of time, the situation on the battlefield changed again. First, the Tsuchikage appeared from nowhere in the sky and did a sneak attack on Naito using his dust release. Followed by a second shocking scene, where Naito, who should have been wiped out by the dust release of the Tsuchikage, managed to block his attack. Then, when the Tsuchikage decided to use his full power to kill Naito, Sakumo rushed over toward him and almost managed to kill him. Every scene was shocking. But from all of these scenes, the most shocking one was the one when Naito blocked the dust release. Even though this one has been followed by other shocking scenes, almost every single rock shinobi was still shocked by that. In the sky, Sakumo didn't have the ability to stay in the air, so he was slowly falling down toward the ground. In the distance, Sando got stricken by Sakumo, his body got injured badly, and he was getting treated by a medical ninja. He was also the Anbu captain, but he couldn't stop Sakumo, he got easily defeated by him. With his current strength, Sakumo was able to stand still even in the face of a Kage level. A person like Sando will never have a chance in front of him. Are you okay? As he was floating down, Sakumo looked very focused, but both his heart and mind were calm. Naito looked at him and also replayed with a very calm tone. It's nothing. Naito shook his head, and retracted his fist. After he stretched his body, both his muscles and bones suddenly screamed with pain. He just used a full power punch that broke his limit. This has caused some burden on his body, but his recovery ability was also very strong, and it started healing him immediately. Without mentioning that the second stage of the lightning armor technique is very good, although he only practiced it for a short time, it has brought him great improvements for both his body and his shock force. Otherwise, Naito would never be able to stop the dust release. When the crisis was lifted, Sakumo and Naito stood side by side and looked up to the sky while they had the same expression. This is a state of high concentration. There's almost no personal feeling in these kinds of situations. It's an absolute state of battle. Only the elites can enter such a state. Although it's not the same state as the root ninja who doesn't have any feelings, yet in these kinds of battles, it can also be possible to abandon all feelings for a short period of time, to let the mind enter an absolutely calm state. It must be said that Naito reached such a level only because he experienced countless battles before. Sakumo had nothing to be afraid of because Naito has entered the same state as him. Konoha's White Fang and Ashura. Onoki was floating in the air, looking at the two of them with a very cold stare. Unfortunately, his full power dust blow was interrupted by Sakumo, but he didn't expect that shot to be blocked by Naito. Compared to this small issue that Onoki was thinking about, Naito and Sakumo were thinking about a bigger one. Why did the Tsuchikage come here? Naito and Sakumo were thinking about the same thing. It's necessary to know that under normal circumstances like these, the Kage should sit in his village to protect it. Once he moves out of his village, it will be easy to be targeted by other villages, and in this case, it will be both the rain and the sand. What is he thinking? Even if he doesn't die here, he might get badly injured. Therefore, the only reason that will make a Kage move out from his village is if there's another Kage engaged the battle, but the war was still in its early stages, and all of the villages were using their Anbu captain and their assistants to lead the armies. But at this moment, the battlefield had the Tsuchikage, his assistants, and the Anbu captain of the rock village. Almost all of them are here. Onoki doesn't he care about his village anymore? Naito and Sakumo had doubts in their hearts, but at this moment, he's already here, and if you don't know the answer, just shouldn't think about it. Both of them were in a state of absolute concentration, in a battle against the Tsuchikage and his powerful dust release. They shouldn't think about anything else but how to deal with him. There was no trace of fear inside their hearts. This is a war. Tsuchikage-sama. Tsuchikage-sama. Most of the Shinobis from the rock didn't know that Onoki is going to engage the battle, so at this time, they wake up from the shock they had when Naito blocked his dust and revealed a very inspired expression. The Tsuchikage engaged the battlefield. The dust blow made some effect on the battlefield. The Shinobis from both sides were feeling dizzy, which made the two get divided equally. This is the power of the Tsuchikage. His title is no less compared to the White Fang and Konoha's Ashura. On the other side, Konoha's Shindoa were also shocked. They never thought that the Tsuchikage is going to engage the battle, but when they saw how Naito blocked his dust release, and how Sakumo almost managed to cut his head, they felt somehow confident. So what if the Hokage wasn't here? They had on their side two of the strongest elites on their sides. Onoki looked down on Naito and Sakumo. His expression was very gloomy, and he didn't know what to do next. Finally, at the next moment, he waved his hand then shouted, "Destroy them." "Yes, sir." The moment they heard these two words, the whole morale of the Rock's army raised, their expression changed and charged at Konoha's side. The ninjas of Konoha didn't look less confident than them. They didn't have any fear. They screamed and charged toward them too. The war has exploded again. However, even inside this fierce battle, Sakumo, Naito and the Onoki didn't move. All the attacks were bypassing through them. In fact, no one dared to attack them. The three men were facing each other. Naito seemed to be the weakest part out of the three, but after he managed to block Onoki's dust, he needed to be aware from him, he's not less important than Sakumo. Even Sakumo is no less than Naito. The guy almost managed to cut Onoki's head. The Tsuchikage's expression became cold. It might be true that Hatake Sakumo for now is stronger than Naito since he was at his peak, but Naito was growing a lot every day under his assistance. This is needed to be stopped. At this age, this strength is so terrible. He came to the battlefield knowing that the third Hokage Sarutobi will never be in it. The only reason for him to leave his village and came all the way to the battlefield is to kill Naito and stop him from being a big threat in the future. Onoki's killing intent was very strong. At the next moment, Onoki suddenly put one hand next to the other, and a white halo light started to appear on his palm. Then with one move he sent away that force toward them. Even if you are far away, you could easily feel the horrible chakra flowing. It's the dust release. Whoom. Whoom. Facing this technique, Naito and Sakumo didn't hesitate, and almost moved at the same time. Sakumo's power can be very terrifying too. After all, he was using the Raken technique, which is working the same way as the Raikiri, yet he was injecting it into his sword. It was very fast, and it could cut anything. Yet Naito's speed was even higher. Using his through technique, Naito was able to cross over the battlefield in seconds. Naito and Sakumo both moved so fast, crossing the battlefield, leaving after images everywhere. The two of them moved precisely the same way, and suddenly, blood was splashing everywhere, and the bodies of countless of rock shinobis got cut into two halves. Damn! There was a hint of irritability in Onoki's eyes. If Naito and Sakumo got mixed in the crowd, he would no longer be able to fight. Onoki's dust release has a very wide range. If he throws it wildly, he can cause a very devastating damage to the battlefield. But Onoki couldn't do that since the rock shinobis were mixed with Konohas, and he could kill his allies this way. Of course, Naito and Sakumo's intentions weren't killing the rock's shinobis, but to prevent him from using the dust release. If they kill the rock shinobis, the number of the rock's army will drop, they will end up retreating, then Onoki will just wipe everyone with his dust release. So, they were actually just passing by them. Naito and Sakumo were thinking the same way. This was only a plan to drag the fight to another location. Whoosh! Whoosh! Naito and Sakumo crossed the battlefield in the blink of an eye. They went so far away, but not that far from the battlefield. Both sides were able to see each other from a distance. They reached a hilly area, then the two of them leaped toward it and stood there. The Tsuchikage saw this scene. He didn't hesitate, and followed them from the sky, with a cold stare on his face. The truth is, Sakumo was also slightly younger than Onoki, but Naito was the youngest. But these two young people were challenging an elder. There was nothing to talk about here because they didn't need to speak. Their intentions were very clear, yet also the response was very obvious too. There's no way that Onoki will turn off this challenge. That would be impossible. Because he's a Kage, one of the strongest Kages in the world of ninja. A man who's worth to be called a Kage will never run away. Earth release, fist rock technique. In an instant, Onoki rushed down from the sky, slamming Naito and Sakumo with his fist. The dust release made him consume a lot of chakra, and he couldn't use it continuously. He needed to recover a little bit of his chakra first. Even so, he wasn't even afraid of two younger people. Bang! The rock fists of Onoki wasn't the same as any other user. He was a master of the earth release, which made this technique a lot stronger than usual. Onoki's fist fell, and Sakumo fell back 2 steps instead of trying to avoid it, leaving Naito in front to handle it. Naito looked at the rock fist falling down, yet his body didn't move. He calmly looked at him, then punched it back. Boom! The two fists collided with each other at the same time, but the effect was quite different. The air burst and the force of shock slammed the rock. Even Onoki's rock fist technique couldn't compete with Naito's shocks. Onoki was sure now that the accident when Naito blocked his dust wasn't out of luck. Naito seems to be possessing a very strange power related to his blood limit. If it gets any stronger, it may even defeat his dust. The more he thought about that, the more he felt the need to kill him. Suddenly his eyes become colder. Earth release, Earth Dragon Bullet. Boom! 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 In the blink of an eye, Onoki transformed the surface underneath of Naito and Sakumo into a river of mud that sweeps them off their feet. Then a dragon head appeared and started to shoot mud balls at them. This move is not an advanced ninjutsu, but when it's cast from a Kage it will even more powerful. Sakumo jumped into the air, and suddenly countless mud balls were right in front of him, and he couldn't dodge them. However, Konoha's White Fang will never lose in the face of these kinds of tricks. He waved his sword, cutting his way through these balls. As for Naito on the other side, his move was even simpler. He jumped in the air, then he kicked the space under him. Boom! The mud balls that were heading toward him got all smashed by his shocks. At the same time, Naito teleported very fast toward Onoki, smashing him down with a punch. Humph! Onoki looked at Naito, then he suddenly snorted. This is one of the few times that someone tried to attack him from the sky. Since he had the ability to float, no one ever dared to attack him from above. Earth release, Golem technique. When the force of the shock was crashing down, reaching him, a huge golem rose from the ground, blocking Naito's attack. Onoki used this technique several times in the original story. Its defensive power is powerful, and at this time, it was enough to block Naito's punch. However, Naito's attack didn't stop there. He reached his back, pulling out his Kusanagi sword. Then he rushed over toward Onoki again from the sky at top speed. At the same time, Sakumo rushed over from the other side at full speed. Whoosh! The two of them flashed with a silver color from the two sides of the field. In the next moment, the two of them struck down both Onoki and the golem. The last got split into two halves, but Onoki managed at the last second to retreat. Although it was so dangerous to dodge the strike of these two swords, Onoki didn't have any choice. He stood up in the distance, while some part of his clothes got shattered, and a blood mark appeared on his shoulder. It hurt. The two of them turned around looking at him holding both of their swords. Both of them used their full force in that attack. They seemed like they could even cut the sky if they wanted. The battlefield in the distance wasn't so far from here, and it's almost clear from where they were standing. They could see everything in the other side, including the scene when they managed to cut Onoki's shoulder. The Tsuchikage got hurt. This is impossible. Some of the rock's shinobis had a very terrified look on their faces. Although it didn't look like a serious injury, but we're talking about the Tsuchikage here. He's one of the strongest ninjas in the world. HolyOniiSama consumed a lot of his chakra, and he can't use the dust release for a short time. Don't worry, this will end soon. When the HolyOniiSama restores his chakra, Konoha's White Fang and Ashura wouldn't be able to face him. After a few of them saw how their will got a little bit broken, they suddenly looked at them and comforted them. Hearing these words, they all came to their senses again and nodded. That's right. The Tsuchikage got injured because he couldn't use his dust release. Once he recovers some of his chakra, he will turn around the situation. In the distance, the Tsuchikage's expression calmed down after he suffered a shoulder injury, but his killing intent was on its peak. He looked left at Naito, then right at Sakumo. Then he lifted up his body in the air. Naito and Sakumo saw this scene. Naturally, they wouldn't let the Tsuchikage move the fight to the sky. Therefore, both of them rushed over trying to intercept him. Whoosh! The two of them looked like a stream of light, flashing over the distance toward the Tsuchikage. For a moment, the two of them looked like they were gonna cross the whole battlefield rushing toward Onoki, who was already floating in the air. However, looking at this scene, Onoki's face suddenly showed a hint of coldness, while he moved both his hand against his chest. Whoom! Under the crazy flow of his chakra, a white halo emerged on the palms of Onoki, then it turned in a square cube of light. It's the dust release again. Here it comes. The Tsuchikage has finally recovered his chakra. Great, this will definitely kill these two. Watching this scene, even the eyes Onoki's assistants flashed with a hint of excitement. Orochimaru and the others who saw this scene were frowning at each other. It really isn't easy, he's a Kage after all. However, the so-called dust release that is above all the other blood limits got blocked by the earthquake release. This is tough for both sides. The two looked differently to the distance where Naito and Sakumo were having a fierce battle against the Tsuchikage. On the other side, Onoki was ready to blow both Naito and Sakumo with his dust. This was very dangerous. Naito was closer than Sakumo. Even if he managed to cut it with his sword, Sakumo would still be hit by the dust. Slightly biting her lips, Tsunade with a sigh of anger looked at this scene. Tsunade joined the battlefield a little bit later, but she couldn't do anything to help the two of them. In fact, no one could do anything. The only people who could stand in the face of the Tsuchikage were Naito and Sakumo. At this moment, even the battlefield wasn't important. The battle on the other side is the one that was gonna determine the outcome of this war. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. After the technique was ready, Onoki didn't hesitate to throw it toward them. Without making any sound, the white cube of light moved forward with a horrible atmosphere that caused suffocating for most of the people. Sakumo's heart got stunned for a moment. Suddenly his eyes were flashing, then he jumped in the air and avoided it. Naito, who was holding the Kusanagi sword, didn't seem the same. He suddenly stopped moving, and the cube of dust hit him, but instantly he turned into smoke and disappeared. It was just a clone. Naito's body appeared in the distance, while his chakra was crazy flowing into his palm. The shocks were emerging in the center of the chakra, forming the shape of the ball, destroying the whole space around it. What is that? Onoki's brows wrinkled, and his face showed a hint of coldness. Is that brat planning on blocking his dust with that small ball? If he just tried to avoid it, he would have a few seconds to go all the way around him and maybe even attack Onoki. The regular using of the dust release is different from this technique. This is a one-time attacking cube. It doesn't extend really fast like the previous one, which makes it more easier to avoid, but the power of this technique is more powerful. The power of this technique is enormous, and nothing would be able to stop it. Onoki stood there looking at Naito and couldn't help but reveal a hint of mockery. It felt as if he was saying that this is the end for Naito. But the next moment, Naito suddenly threw the ball toward the cube of dust. Can he throw it out? Onoki suddenly got shocked. He didn't expect this. He thought that Naito will reach the dust and press that ball into its center. Unexpectedly, this technique turned out to be a thrown one. But even if he could throw it out, it will never be able to block his dust. Onoki was extremely confident. He regained his focus, and with a straight face, he looked at Naito as if he already seen the outcome. In the next moment, the small ball finally collided with the cube of dust. Earthquake release, Hokage. Naito looked up at the sky while his eyes looked very confident. He wasn't sure that he can defeat Onoki, yet he was confident in his blood limit. The earthquake will never lose to the dust. Crack. This was the second clash between the dust and the shocks. In an instant, the Hokage went in the center of the dust cube. Suddenly, both techniques were stagnating in the air at the same time, like if a cube of a transparent bubble was wrapping another ball of a bubble. At this moment, both Naito and Onoki have lost control over their ninjutsu. Upon seeing this scene, Onoki's expression changed, and his face revealed a trace of horror. Shit! Without hesitation, Onoki rushed far away into the sky. At the same time, both Naito and Sakumo flashed far away from the range of these two techniques, leaving the hilly area. Suddenly the two techniques crushed into each other, causing a big explosion. Thousands of rays flashed together. It was like an endless stream of stars shining on the battlefield. The infinite light finally caused a strong dazzling, then it finally exploded and spread in all directions. There was no sound from the beginning to the end. But wherever the light shined, it seemed if there was a violent and invisible force shattering everything into dust. Under the gaze of countless people, the huge hill suddenly got completely turned into ashes and disappeared. The Tsuchikage also looked very terrified, but it wasn't from this scene. The fact that Naito managed to block the dust was what scared him the most. Moreover, this time he used his strongest technique, and it wasn't even a sneaky one, but Naito managed to beat his dust in a real frontal clash. What a shock! In this world, there is really a blood limit that can fight against his dust. No, this unacceptable. Someone who possesses the strongest blood limit in the world will never accept the existence of a more stronger one. In fact, Naito's shock still didn't reach its strongest form, yet it managed to block his full power dust. Thinking of this, Onoki couldn't help but take a deep breath, then his eyes fall again on the figure of Naito. It took him a long time to reach this level. Yet Naito at this age managed to reach that level. The horrible power swept in all direction, and wherever it hit, whether it was muddy ground or hard one, it turned them all into dust. Finally, when the waves stopped, a huge semicircular deep pit appeared in the field. What a shocking scene! It looked like heaven and earth got crushed each other. Therefore, the rocks shine abyss looked at the field, with an incredible expression on their faces. They felt like they were daydreaming. The thing that happened to the field was nothing. The fact that Naito was able to block Onoki's dust was the most incredible thing for them. Almost all the rocks shinobi know what kind of release is the dust. It was created by the second Tsuchikage Mua, and the only one who could use it after him was the third. It's the bloodline limit that above all the other bloodline limits. The second Tsuchikage was the strongest in the world after the death of the Sanju brothers, despite the fact that he died in a mysterious way after he fought against the second Mitsukage in a fierce battle that ended with both of them killing each other. No one ever dared to underestimate his power nor his dust release. The dust release has the power to wipe out any kind of bloodline limits, yet Naito's strange power managed to block it. This only means that Naito's power is also a bloodline limit that is above all other bloodline limits. Sando, the assistant of Onoki, was standing from a distance looking at this scene, while his eyes looked all gloomy. Impossible. He actually blocked the dust release. Is this a joke? The Anbu next to him looked very calm from the outside, but behind that mask, he was so freaked out, he couldn't believe what he saw. It's not a matter of strength. The dust release is an advanced branch of jutsu that is more advanced than the jutsu class of Kekii Genkai. The only thing that could stop it was the Rinnegan's Pratapath that can absorb any kind of chakra. It's an incredible thing to see the dust release get blocked by another kind of power. Of course, the only reason that made Naito block it was because his power is from the beginning independent of Naruto's world unique power system. Therefore, the shock force is able to block any kind of powers whether it was a bloodline limit or a bloodline selection like the dust release. Perhaps it will even be able to block the six-path power in the future. Compared to the horror the rock side felt, Konoha's side got stunned at first, then they all got excited. Suddenly they gained a significant momentum. Orochimaru was slightly surprised at first. Then he licked the corner of his mouth then murmured, the dust release should be able to wipe out any kind of bloodline limits. It seems that Naito is hidden something, and the earthquake release is definitely not just a bloodline limit. Nice work. After she punched the Anbu so hard and fell back, Tsunade looked at Naito from a distance with a strange look on her face. Sakumo took a few steps and reached Naito's side. The two stood next to each other looking at Onoki in the sky. The fact that Naito blocked Onoki's dust made Sakumo very shocked, but this didn't matter at the time, because this made them the favorable side in this battle. Onoki was floating in the sky, looking down at Naito, while the look on his face changed from a pure killing intent to a one full of hatred. This little devil. At this moment, Onoki started to get afraid of Naito's power. Yet Onoki didn't give up, he continued his attack on Sakumo and Naito. Naito and Sakumo didn't need to communicate, and they immediately rushed toward the Tsuchikage, and the war broke again. Boom! The ground and the sky were shaking and trembling so hard that everyone in the battlefield felt it. It was like endless meteors were hitting the ground so hard. For a moment, this battle looked like it was never gonna end. A hit here, a cut there, a dust cube here, and a shock wave there. The three of them were going back and forth trying to kill each other. Yet this time, Onoki's attention was different. He knew that he couldn't kill Naito first. Therefore, he decided to kill Sakumo then Naito. It's hard to kill Naito because he could block his dust release with the shock, therefore, Sakumo was the weak spot here. After all, even if he was strong, Sakumo didn't have the power to cut the dust release with his sword. Boom! Boom! The ground was shaking and trembling so hard from the countless clashes of the dust and the shock power, while the momentum was getting higher and higher. The other ninjas were looking from a distance at the battlefield while the two of them were trying again and again to kill their Kage. Onoki was getting pushed back under the excellent combination attacks of Sakumo and Naito. In the end, the battle got more and more fierce, and the momentum got raised even higher, and Onoki suddenly managed to target Sakumo with his dust release and almost kill him, if he didn't get hit by Naito's shock too at the same time. Onoki tried to avoid it, but he got slightly hit by its power. Crack! Onoki got shocked by Naito's attack, then he immediately spurted blood. Sure enough, that kid's power is not a joke. I got slightly hit by his attack, yet I got hurt badly. Onoki's expression got really ugly. It made him spurt blood, but it was only a minor injury. If this continues, he will kill Sakumo eventually, but he will undoubtedly die too in this battlefield. Which one is important, his life or Sakumo's? For Onoki, the answer to this question was obvious. Finally, under the joining power of both Naito and Sakumo, the third Tsuchikage Onoki lost the battle. With the retreat of their commander, the momentum of the rock Shinobi's collapsed. Seeing their own Kage getting defeated, the rock army lost their will to fight, and the whole army broke. While the momentum of Konoha reached its peak, Naito and Sakumo managed to defeat a Kage. They beat one of the 5 strongest ninjas in the world. What a shocking and exciting news! Although the outcome got already determined, Konoha's army was chasing down every single ninja from the rock and killing them. The blood dyed the whole battlefield with a red color, the entire battlefield turned into a bloodbath, the corpses were everywhere, and the blood was flowing like a river. At this point, the rock village got completely defeated. Damn, even the Tsuchikage got defeated. Sando, the assistant of Onoki, was looking at the rock's army who got defeated with a bitter expression. He had some unwillingness in his hair, yet he couldn't do nothing. Moreover, what he was really feeling is horror. The Hokage didn't participate in this battle, yet Naito and Sakumo alone managed to defeat the Tsuchikage. Is this the real power of Konoha? Even if they couldn't kill him, their power cannot be underestimated. Sando calmed himself down and prepared to retreat with Onoki. But at the same time, Jiraiya rushed toward him to stop him from escaping. Damn you, Konoha's pig, do you think you can kill me? Sando got angry. So what if he lost an arm? He will never lose to anyone. In the next moment, a cold voice spoke from behind his back. He can't kill you, but I can. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sword got thrust from his back, breaking through his heart, then it cut its way out from his chest. Sando turned his head around in pain while the blood was flowing out from his mouth to see Naito's shadow. The only and last thing he could think about is when did he appear behind him. What kind of speed is that? In the next moment, Naito moved out his sword, and Sando's corpse got dropped dead on the ground. Phew, you're finally here. Jiraiya saw this scene and couldn't help but reveal a sigh of relief. Although Sando was seriously injured, still, he was powerful. Jiraiya was also worried about his forbidden technique, so he was very cautious. But it seems after he lost his arm, Sando was unable to use that technique very fast. In other words, Naito came too fast before he could even use that technique and killed him. Yeah. After he nodded at Jiraiya, Naito rushed again into the battlefield. He once again was standing from behind looking at Naito's back. He couldn't help but to take a deep breath and reveal a bit of sigh. Even a Kage lost to him, huh? Who could believe that the young child from that tournament would turn out to be this strong? Together, Naito and Sakumo made the rock village suffer a lot of casualties. Although Onoki has the dust release that can wipe out almost the whole army of Konoha, he got blocked by Naito and Sakumo and couldn't do anything. It can be said that the battle between these three determined the outcome of the whole war. Although there was still some more troops waiting in the rock village, they couldn't simply move toward the battlefield, otherwise, the entire village will get wiped out by the sand. It should be noted that the defeat of the Tsuchikage was the main reason behind the loss of the Rock's army. Moreover, both the assistant and Anbu captain of Onoki died on the battlefield. It can be said that the Rock Village got disqualified from the Second World War. The only remainings in this war are the rain, the sand, and Konoha. The land of fire, Konoha. At the main gate of the village, there was a team getting gathered. There were more than 10 elites from the Anbu, most of them were team leaders, and there was a dozen of other shinobis. None of them were ranked below a Jonin because was an emergency team support, only the best ninjas were choosing, and the leader of this squad was the Hokage. In such a situation, the leader shouldn't be anyone but the Hokage himself. "Sarutobi-sama, we're ready to go." Besides Sarutobi, he was the only special Jonin, Mato Dai. In this year, Mato Dai was promoted from Genin to a special Jonin, and he's almost qualified to become a Jonin. He heard that the Tsuchikage has engaged the battlefield, and he was so worried about Naito. Dai lived the same way as Guy. He didn't have friends. The first and only friend he had was Naito, but he wasn't only his friend, he also was his disciple. Once that kid was someone who stalked Dai to teach him how to open the Hakemon Tonku's gates. Now that kid become so strong thanks to that technique, and people start to call him Konoha's Ashura. At this time, Guy was born. Besides his wife and son, the only person who cared about was Naito. Dai, don't let your emotions control you, rushing things won't help us. With a calm tone Sarutobi tried to comfort Dai, but deep inside he was so angry, and his eyes were very cold. The Tsuchikage unexpectedly ignored his identity and engaged the battlefield, and he should only blame himself for what is going to happen next. In terms of power, Konoha is the strongest between all the other villages. Even when it was attacked by several villages in the past, Konoha managed to hold their walls against them all. This is the real power of the strongest villages in the ninja world. I will never forgive them if something happened to him. Dai bit his teeth with an angry face. He looked like if he was in pain. Naito is very strong. Even if he got defeated he should be able to escape. Even Dai, who said these words, didn't believe in them. Even if he's very fast that won't help him because he's facing the Tsuchikage after all. He's standing in the face of a man who is one of the strongest ninjas in the world. Sarutobi listened to Dai's words, but couldn't add anything, because in the case where Naito is defeated, Konoha's army will get completely destroyed in no time. But the most important thing is, will Sakumo be able to survive? He couldn't help but expect the worst. He didn't expect that the Tsuchikage will send another army behind Konoha to continue the previous battle, and surely he didn't expect him to engage the battle personally. Sarutobi, who was leading the supporting squad, was ready to rush to the front lines. He gathered his best men, and it was only a matter of time before they reached the battlefield. And just when they stepped out of Konoha and were ready to take the road, they received emergency information from the front line. Whoosh! A ninja appeared in front of them and bowed down at the Hokage. "Sarutobi-sama, an urgent report from the battlefield." "Proceed." Sarutobi took a deep breath and prepared himself for the worst. "The commander of our army, Sakumo Dono, along with Nashio, joined forces and defeated the Tsuchikage Onoki. The battle continued for 2 days, and ended up by the death of Sando, Onoki's assistant, and the defeat of the Rocks. More than half of the Rock's army got killed and injured, even most of the ninjas who escaped were badly injured. The estimated number of the people who managed to go back to the Rock village should be very low. With just these two sentences, the silence controlled the atmosphere. What did you just say? Even Sarutobi couldn't believe what he just heard, because even the ninja who delivered this information looked very shocked. As for the other ninjas of the squad had unbelievable expressions on their faces, they felt like they were dreaming. What did he just say? The underground of Konoha. Danza didn't return to the battlefield after the last meeting. If he was there, perhaps the event of the Tsuchikage engaging the battlefield wouldn't be that bad. Danza and Sakumo should have been enough to block him. Even if they couldn't defeat him, they will still be able to block him for some time. Danza's power is also the same as Hokage, and he has extraordinary abilities, and a bunch of forbidden techniques. He didn't show up his real power in the original story, he only used the Izonage, but in fact, he possessed more secret techniques than that. Danza should be ranked as one of the strongest shinobis of his time. The Hokage is going to engage the battlefield. Danza was wailing in the dark, and he looked like he was talking to himself. Whoosh! A ninja appeared from the smoke. He bended one knee and bowed toward Danza, then said, "Danza Dono, the Hokage has already left." Okay. Danza nodded, and a strange color flashed in his eyes. Since the Hokage left, there's no one in Konoha to control the situation but Danza himself. And in these kinds of situations, even the Hokage's life will be in danger. He may get injured or even killed. And this is an opportunity for Danza to take the lead. I might lose both Naito and Sakumo in this war, but it's still not impossible for me to conquer the world. Danza whispered these words with a cold stare on his face. His primary goal was always to become the Hokage after all. In the original story, Danza didn't get this opportunity only later when Pain attacked the village and wrecked it. At that time, Danza stepped in to take the position because Tsunade, who was the Hokage, suffered a fatal injury and her life was in danger. Danza will always sacrifice everything to become the Hokage. It's my chance to become the next Hokage. Danza was already picturing himself wearing the Hokage's hat, and step by step conquering the ninja world, making Konoha the real leader of the whole world. But in the next moment, the Rutengu in front of him suddenly looked awkward, and his expression changed as if he received unbelievable news. He couldn't help but interrupt Danza's daydreams. Danza Dono, and urgent information from the front lines. Proceed. Danza replayed very quickly, then took a sip from the cup of tea on his table. Danza looked like he already knew the outcome. He couldn't predict who died first, but both Naito and Sakumo should be dead. Naito and the commander of Konoha's army Sakumo joined forces and managed to defeat the Tsuchikage, and kill his assistant Sando. Konoha won the war. Snapped. The cup of tea slipped from his hand and fall on the ground, then got broken into countless of pieces, the hot water fall on his clothes, yet Danza didn't notice any of this from the shock. Before the beginning of this war, no one ever heard about the name of Konoha's Ashura nor the name of Konoha's White Fang, but now, the two names were singing throughout the world. Not only they did manage to kill Sando Onoki's assistant, but they even defeated the Tsuchikage of the Rock Village. Although they joined their forces to defeat him, still, he was one of the 5 strongest Kages. Not to mention, even if they were 3 people, that will still be enough to make them famous. In the original story, Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya were nicknamed the 3 legendary Sannin for the rest of their lives because they managed to hold back Hanzo the Salamander in a battle. It can be said that their reputation got built based on this event. In the past, Naito and Sakumo were nobodies, no one ever knew their existing. But from now on, the titles of Konoha's Ashura and Konoha's White Fang has the attention of everyone in the world. Even though their strength isn't qualified to be at the same level as Hokage, but their reputation has already reached the peak. The Rain Country, Konoha's camp. The rain was falling as always, but Konoha's Shinobi built a big dome from rock preventing the water from entering the camp. After the last battle, Sarutobi sent his instructions back to everyone in the camp very quickly, to treat both Naito and Sakuma with respect and honor. Of course, these instructions didn't mean anything. Things like respect and honor cannot be gained from a promotion. It can be said that there wasn't any shinobi in the entire camp who didn't admire and respect Naito. Even the elites such as Orochimaru and Tsunade respected him. He gained this respect and honor by his strength. In addition to this, Naito has finally got promoted to a Jonin. An 11-year-old Jonin, Naito has made history here. Even Hatake Kakashi in the original book become a Jonin at the age of 12. It can be said that the status of Naito has almost reached the extreme. The only there who got a higher status than him are first, Konoha's police force leader, the Anbu captain, and the Hokage's assistant. There's also Konoha's council members who are considered the highest under the Hokage. However, it's evident that the leader of Konoha's police force status is just for show, since he's also the Uchiha's head and he only works for his clan favor, and the only members of the police force are from the Uchiha. The Anbu captain position is impossible for him since his ability has already been revealed to all the world and he will never be able to serve while hiding his identity. Of course, more importantly, is because both Naito and Sakuma now have shown their worth, and their power is better for not being hidden in the dark. As for the assistant of the Hokage, is currently Danza. Will he step down for Naito to take his position? That's impossible. Even if they tortured him with fire, he will never let go of his position to Naito. The amount of the hatred he has for Naito is just enough. Coupled with the fact that Naito is so young, and it's impossible for him to be one of the elders. As for becoming a Hokage, he shouldn't even think about it right now. In other words, Naito's status has reached the extreme in a very short time. However, Naito doesn't even care about that. Naito didn't care about his status. The only thing he was thinking about from the start is power. Power is power. Naito's room once again has moved out and it been located directly in the headquarters of the camp. No one ever complained about that. Whether it's Naito or Konoha's Ashura, he's more than enough to stay there. This damn weather. It's making my practice more difficult. Sitting there, Naito slowly opened his eyes, while he looked very annoyed. In the rain country, water is everywhere. Although the rain will not fall into the house, and there's no water on the ground, but still, the humidity is very high. The water is an electrical conductive. Therefore, the power of lightning gets easily spilled over, making it difficult for Naito to control it. The problem is that Naito is currently practicing the second stage of lightning armor. The thunder release is no doubt the most difficult to control between all the other attributes. It's even more violent than the fire. The flame can be easily played in the palm of the hand, and you can even turn it into a fireball. But lightning is a different case. You will never be able to do that easily. That only proves the real talent of Uchiha Sasuke and how he could master the lightning release at a very young age. Thunder. Looking at the lightning aura around his body, Naito softly whispered this word, then the lightning started to gather into his palm. Constantly, the thunder started forming the shape of a thunderball. Boom. However, after the lightning started to slightly condensing, it exploded. Naito didn't get hurt. Not only because Naito's body is strong enough, but also because of his high control of the lightning flow, it will never hurt his body. Even if he didn't reach the level where he can be called a master, Naito's control reached a very high standard. As long as I keep practicing, the rain country weather will no longer be able to affect my control. His eyes sparkled, then he went back to practicing the lightning release. And just when he was about to close his eyes again, a killing intent controlled the air in the place. It was so dark and cold, suddenly from nowhere, a shadow appeared behind the back of Naito. Whoosh! With a kunai in his hand, he tried to stab Naito from the back. At the same time, Naito felt the changes in the air and the enormous killing intent targeting him. Assassin! The assassin's kunai has already reached Naito, and it was only 1 inch far from stabbing his back. Suddenly Naito figure disappeared. What? T/N, Nani XD. The assassin's heart suddenly sank into doubt and fear. A clone. Body replacement technique. No, there's no smoke. Just as the ninja was still trying to figure out what is happening, and ready to quickly retreat before things get worse, Naito's shadow appeared again behind him. He reached out his head with one hand. Boom! The ground cracked open like a spider web, as he pressed the ninja head into the ground, and he couldn't be more dead than that. The blood flowed out of his head slowly. The ninja was taking his last breaths with an incredible look on his messed up head, and the only thing he could think about is how could he be this fast? Do you think this is my first time being sneak attacked? How annoying! Looking down on the corpse, Naito's eyes were full of coldness. Any other person would be freaked out now after being targeted by an assassin, but not Naito. He looked as cool as ever. Since he defeated Onoki along with Sakumo, Naito was targeted many times. Sometimes they and you from the rock, other were from the sand, sometimes they didn't even know their identities. There are even some assassins who seemed to be from the underground black market since there was a bounty on Naito's head. Sakumo didn't get targeted many times. Only Naito was getting targeted this much. It seems that some people are underestimating him because he's young. Even if he's strong, he will still gonna be full of opening, so they were all targeting him. Although every ninja who tried to get Naito got killed, they didn't stop and kept on coming back every time. In addition, the battlefield was in chaos, so the number of attacks was going higher, which affected Naito's training badly. It's estimated that it will take a long time for the situation to get better. Or maybe Naito will do something to these assassins that will shock the whole world again and will prevent everyone from targeting him. What happened? Finally, a bunch of ninjas who heard the noise from Naito's room came, then they took a glance at the assassin's body on the ground. Naito looked at the ninja in front of him, then said in an understatement, "Nothing, it's just another assassin who managed to break through our defenses." After he said that, cold sweat appeared on the forehead of the ninja. "I'm very sorry, you Naito. It's really hard in these kinds of situations to keep an eye on everything happening in the camp while everyone is out there doing missions." The ninja tried to explain the situation with a slight tone. Upon hearing this, Naito took a deep breath, then he shook his head and waved, "Forget it, just clean up the body." "Yes." The ninja nodded in a very formal way, then he immediately started cleaning the body. And just when Naito was a little bit depressed and troubled, a figure walked into his room. "Is it another assassination?" The person who walked in was Tsunade. She lived next door to Naito's room. He recognized her voice immediately. "Yes." Naito nodded, then said, "These guys will never get me. But this seems endless, they will never stop." Listening to Naito, Tsunade felt sorry for him, She shook her head watching the ninja cleaning up the body. This is really annoying. After a while, the ninja finished cleaning the body. Suddenly Tsunade looked at Naito and said, "If you want you can come and stay in my room, they will never dare to attack you if there are two people in the room." Naito got slightly surprised to hear this. Tsunade's room was next to his. She didn't ask him to open a door between the two rooms. She actually asked him to live with her. Cough. This is a little bit awkward. You're a medical ninja, you're busy all the time, how could you always be with me? Naito said that while looking at Tsunade. Tsunade was a medical ninja, and she was always participating in the front lines. Right. Tsunade's eyes looked a little bit wrinkled as she said, "Well, if you want someone else to be always with you, why don't you ask Orochimaru? His room is next to you from the other side too, right?" Puff. Naito heard these words, then he felt like he wanted to vomit. Living with Orochimaru, just what Tsunade is thinking. Naito would rather deal with 2 assassinations every day than leaving with Orochimaru in the next room. She's joking, right? After she finished her sentence, Tsunade felt the same way. No one will ever dare to live with Orochimaru. What he will do if he wakes up in the middle of the night to find himself already getting dissected. I'll ask Sakumo to help you, how about that? Tsunade said that, then she walked out of Naito's room. Naito shook his head helplessly, then he immediately looked at the ninjas who already dealt with the corpse, cleaned the blood and fixed the ground. You can all go. Yes. The ninjas nodded respectfully at Naito, then left his room. This wasn't weird for them, they really admired Naito despite his young age. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't feel this safe. His existing only around them gives them hope. This satisfying situation they are in right now is because of him after all. After they left, Naito began his training again. Soon, Tsunade went to Sakumo, the last, send a special Shinboi squad to guard Naito's room all the time while he's in there. Of course, because the room is in the headquarters, he could easily send some ninjas to guard it. These shinobi may not have the strength to stop every assassin, but they are more than enough to scare them off. After they start guarding his room, the assassination numbers dropped down magnificently. After all, Naito's room was well guarded, and he was spending his whole time in there. After the Rock Village got defeated, the war became a 3-sided one. The sand, the rain, and Konoha. Among them, Konoha occupied absolute strength and advantage. The sand and the rain stopped fighting each other and start targeting Konoha together. Even so, they still couldn't hurt Konoha badly since Hanzo still didn't show himself, and when he does this war will be over. Even if Tsunade cracked his poison, Konoha would still be unable to defeat him. Perhaps the original story didn't show how powerful this man is, but since he managed to hold his walls against the 3 major villages and was considered as a demigod, there's no doubt that this man is strong. Otherwise, he would have been easily killed. He's a headache to everyone, and even if Sakumo is strong, it will be difficult for him to deal with Hanzo. While Konoha was thinking of a way to deal with Hanzo, Naito's control over the lightning release was finally proceeding. In Naito's room. Awkward. The lightning was flowing through Naito's body, then flashing on his palm, while rays of thunder start to flash out from his fingertips. Suddenly the lightning took the shape of a ball. Even though occasional arcs was flashing out from the thunderball, it didn't lose its shape or explode. It's finally almost up to standard. Seeing this result, Naito nodded with satisfaction. Suddenly he thought of something. He used the lightning in the ball and spread it on his whole body, enveloping it with lightning. Naito wasn't wearing anything on his upper part of his body. At this time, his skin has almost completely changed to a bronze color, but it's not as dark as the third or the fourth Hokage, the color was still lighter. This made Naito's body less tender and more mature, and his appearance looked perfect. The lightning release was flowing in Naito's body, yet this time under Naito's strong control, there was no trace of revolting due to the rain weather. The lightning kept flowing into Naito's body and constantly stimulating his body cells. It wasn't just stimulating the cells, in fact, it was boosting the chakra's cells, so that every cell of his body becomes stronger, making it carry, complementing, and promoting his chakra even more. Under the control of Naito under the lightning release, his body was strengthened continuously. The second stage of the lightning armor has gradually reached 5% of mastering, after that, it reached 10%, then it approached the 20%, Naito's body was getting stronger every time, while the reverse Hakemon Tenku was also strengthening him even more, until he finally reached the standards of opening the fourth gate. As for the power of the shock, it has also increased a little bit further. Naito was concentrating on his training. Of course, a guy with his status will never have to do small tasks. Also, there's the thing with Sarutobi who wasn't trusting Naito enough to give him any actual worthy position, otherwise, Naito would be leading the army right now. For a long time, Sarutobi didn't give him any missions or tasks. He preferred to keep Naito close to him and asked him to stay in his room and concentrate on his practice. After he trained for some time, Naito stopped, and the aura around his body disappeared. Knock. There was a knock on the door. In fact, it wasn't on the door, most of the people were knocking on the wall, so they can give the person in the room a hint about them coming in. Naito dressed up and then said, "Come in." In a second, Tsunade entered the room. "You Naito, how is your training?" Tsunade quickly moved toward Naito. If she didn't know already that Naito would be wearing nothing while practicing his lightning release, she would have entered directly. "Good." Naito nodded slightly looking at Tsunade, but suddenly he smiled and said, "You look in a hurry, what is it? Is another crisis you're bringing it in with you?" "No, not a crisis, it's just another decisive war coming." Tsunade took a deep breath, then looked at Naito in a severe way. Her expression revealed that she wasn't joking. This war has been going on for almost a year now. With the continuation of this situation, the resources such as manpower and material resources are greatly consumed. The high-rises of Konoha have made a decision to prepare for a final battle against the sand and the rain. We're going to wipe both of them with one attack. Sakumo Dono is leading an army out as we're speaking. Listening to Tsunade's words, Naito frowned, revealing a thoughtful expression. Is it finally happening? The end of this war? Naito already knew what is Tsunade gonna say next. Sure enough, what she said next was, "I came asking you to join me. Orochimaru and Jiraiya are in a very important mission. Our mission is to stop Hanzo the Salamander. This guy is extremely powerful, even Sakumo cannot take him down, so he can only play the tactical card against him. We need to drag him down and wait until our army win at the battlefield. Even if he's strong, we will need to stop him." When he heard this, Naito nodded, then asked, "It seems that the people in the battlefield will play a bigger role to end this war." Tsunade shook her head, then said, "No, they have Sakumo, he will be enough. You should come with us to deal with Hanzo, so their army will suffer from the lack of command." It turned out to be this case. Naito understood that Sarutobi is not willing to risk giving Naito the command. Otherwise, Naito's ability would have been more effective than Sakumo at the battlefield. Moreover, Naito's more experienced and mature than before, he's more than qualified to lead the army. No problem. Since Tsunade was very clear with Naito, he didn't reject, but even if she didn't come, Naito would still be uncertain about the three of them stopping Hanzo. Because after the arrival of Naito a lot of things changed in this world. Naito wasn't sure that Hanzo will not pull out something and change the entire destiny of the world. What if the unlikely happens and Hanzo kill them? Orochimaru may not still be able to escape, but the other two will definitely get killed. Hanzo the demigod shinobi. Naito couldn't help but whisper his name. There's no doubt that Hanzo is one of the strongest shinobis in the world. He should be as strong as the 5 Kage. The history itself is proof of his power. He could easily fight against the 3 Sannin. In short, Hanzo the salamander is strong, and he cannot be underestimated. This won't be easy. You Naito, rest assured that Hanzo's poison has been cracked. We have a very special antidote. Once you use it, you will be immune to his poison. Tsunade felt like Naito was worried about Hanzo's power, so she tried to comfort him, with a soft tone. And we're not trying to defeat him, we only need to drag him down for some time until our army win, then we will turn and escape. Understood. Naito listened to Tsunade's word, then he nodded and followed her out of the room. Outside both Orochimaru and Jiraiya was standing there waiting for them. Watching Naito coming out, Orochimaru showed a strange smile on his face, saying, I assume that your training was very good recently. Yeah. Naito nodded at Orochimaru, but he still couldn't understand his intentions. That's good. Orochimaru slightly smirked and turned around. Naito kept looking at him with a hint of surprise on his face. The amount of the chakra flowing in Orochimaru's body was rising every second. Even Naito was cautious of not coming near him too much. Orochimaru looked invincible at the second. Orochimaru, did he reach the level of a Kage already? This thought made Naito feel a little bit shocked, but if you think about it, it's reasonable. Orochimaru was originally a genius that was rarely to exist every 10 years. He was even more talented than Jiraiya and Tsunade. Orochimaru now was in his 20s, yet he was at the peak of his power. Naito frowned as he was looking at Orochimaru. Tsunade noticed the expression he was having and got very worried about him. She thought he was still worried about Hanzo. Even Jiraiya noticed that he smiled at him and said, even I'm not afraid of Hanzo. Naito, you're even stronger than me. You have nothing to worry about, we're 4 against 1. Naito pouted his mouth when he heard Jiraiya's words, but he didn't pay him any more attention and continued to think about Orochimaru. It's normal for ninjas to improve a lot in the early stages, however, after reaching the level of a Kage it will be more challenging to progress any further. Many ninjas will reach their peak at their 30s or 40s and stay there forever. Orochimaru can still improve, but it will take him more time from now on. Naito estimates that he will reach his peak at the Third World War period. After all, he managed to attack Konoha alone after that. Of course, this is also reflected from the other side how strong Sarutobi was to stop him. In the original story, Sarutobi was considered as the strongest Hokage of the dynasties. He was possessing all the techniques of Konoha. Even if this statement was proved wrong later in the story, Sarutobi is still so strong. As for how strong he is, Sarutobi was mastering all the 5 attributes of the chakra nature, along with various of hidden techniques. He's no less than Danzo. The existence of a person who is above the level of a Kage alone is extremely rare in this world. Naito divides merely the last 2 ranks into Kage level and 6th path level. Pain, for example, is at the Kage level. The 6th path level is another whole rank. Hachirama and Madara, for example, didn't reach it. They are kind of between the 2 ranks, yet they possessed the power that can wipe a whole country. Going up, there's the 6th path level. This is the power that even Naruto and Sasuke didn't reach since they divided the power between each other. Whether it's the 6th level or the Kage level, in the face of an ordinary ninja level, the first will be able to wipe anyone easily. Naito is possessing a power that can help him reach that level, but it's not enough yet. After he helps the 3 Sun in defeating Hanzo, Naito was planning on opening the 4th gate and end this war for good. Okay, let's go. After she looked at the 3 of them, Tsunade nodded positively, then the 4 of them led a bunch of elite ninjas, and left the camp. Since the plan is only to hold Hanzo for some time, they didn't need to bring a lot of ninjas along with them. With the departure of the 4 of them, the camp has become completely empty. Just as they put their foot out and left, a white figure was drilling out from the muddy ground. What a shock, it's Zetsu. Leave it, our target is Hanzo. Forget about it, or just report it back. Zetsu looked at the direction of Naito and the other 3 talking with each other, then he disappeared again into the ground. An unknown underground in the world of the ninja. In the depths of the darkness, an old man who looked like he was gonna die at any moment was standing there. The old man looked very weak and seemed like he was gonna fall if anyone poked him. However, there was some shackles settled in his body. The old man didn't have Sharingan, he was looking at the ground with his Rinnegan eye, yet he seemed like he already was seeing the end of this world. His Uchiha Madara. It's only been a few days now, that little devil shouldn't be able to improve a lot in this short period, and the war is already coming to an end. Suddenly from the darkness, Zetsu appeared in front of Madara, while the last looked very calm. Yes, the war is coming to an end, Konoha is starting her last attack. Zetsu moved toward Madara, then said, the kid who spotted your attention, is about to fight Hanzo the demigod. Demigod? Ha ha ha. What a joke. Madara heard this word and couldn't help but laugh. How dare he call himself a god? Even that jumping clown is calling himself a god now. The world has really got messed up, but it's fine, this is good for my plan. After he shook his head, Madara said with a deep voice, keep observing the situation, if Hanzo managed to kill that kid, then we won't need to worry about him anymore, then no one will be able to stop our plan. Understood. Zetsu replayed in a very respectful way, he nodded to Madara, then he disappeared into the ground again. In the rain country, at a muddy hill area, Naito and the others were moving forward. At this time, the difference at speed was evident. The fastest and obviously the strongest was Naito, he running in the front, and closely followed by him was Orochimaru. As for Tsunade, she was a little faster than Jiraiya. The original Jiraiya should be faster, but since Tsunade has mastered Tsuru, she was faster. All the way forward, Naito deliberately speeding up, but Orochimaru was always keeping up with him, which made Naito more certain about how Orochimaru improved a lot in this short period. Moving forward, they reached a forest. Naito slowed down, then Orochimaru and the others also slowed down. I'll search the forest. Orochimaru took a few steps forward, and printed a hand sign, then pressed the ground. In an instant, dozens of small snakes sneaked into the forest and disappeared, while he was closing his eyes. After a few minutes, Orochimaru opened his eyes and said, no ambush. Okay, move on. Naito nodded and immediately led everyone in the woods. After they quickly passed through the woods, they continued to advance toward the depth of the rain country. Along the way, even if Naito was very alert to his surrounding, some shinobis with them were carefully exploring the road ahead, because no one knew where Hanzo will be hiding. Hanzo was extremely cautious, and if they didn't stay focused, they would get attacked by him rather than ambushing him. Naito and the others continued to move through the hinterlands of the rain country, and finally, they encountered a troop from the rain nearby a hilly area. They were moving in a narrow road. Nearby this hilly area, there was some huge gullies and valleys got eroded by water. Naito and the others were above the hill, while the rain troop was marching in the gullies. Because the situation was very perfect, and all the people in the squad were Jonins, Orochimaru rushed into attack. With one look, Naito understood Orochimaru's intention, so he rushed toward Tsunade and waved his hand. Everyone knew what they should do next, and they moved toward Naito's side and jumped in the air while printing hand signs. When the ninjas begin to print, they will naturally produce a significant amount of chakra that will alert the others in the gullies. But it was already too late to react. Water release, blasting. Earth release. Rockfall. Lightning release, thunderbolt. The elite ninjas of Konoha almost made perfect cooperation very fast, the water flow from the sky crashing everything on the ground, the hills from both sides collapsed, and then the thunder elected the water stream. Boom! Everything happened in a few seconds. The rain shine abyss didn't have any time to react, and they were all directly killed by this perfect attack. Some of them could only think about using a clone jutsu to escape, but they didn't have time to block this attack. There wasn't a lot of people in Konoha squad, there were only 30 or 40 people, but the Rain's troop had at least 100 people. Under these circumstances, at least dozens of Rains have died, and the gap between the two sides has reached a level of near equilibrium. Whoosh! Dozens of the other Remaining Shine Abyss sharply predicted the course of the attack and looked above to Naito and the others. When they saw the figure of Naito, they all revealed a hint of hateful. Konoha's Ashura. Naito was already the talk of everyone in this war, so they immediately recognized him. However, shockingly these Shine Abyss didn't look afraid, their expressions quickly calmed down. Because, in the middle of them, there was another person who was as strong as Naito, Hanzo the Salamander. Hanzo took a few steps and became in the front of his troop. When he looked at Naito, Hanzo's eyes became very cold. Konoha's Ashura. So they sent you to stop me. At the same time, Hanzo looked at Orochimaru and the other two, but he especially focused on Orochimaru. That person looks very strong. This young generation of Konoha is really better than any other one. This is the only reason behind Konoha power in this war. Taking a deep breath, Hanzo's eyes calmed down. Even if Konoha win this war, he will never retreat in the fact of these youngsters. Being careful doesn't mean he's afraid. For a person who was called a demigod, there was nothing that could scare him. Let's start this already. Hanzo rushed toward Naito and the others along with his troop. Naito didn't hesitate either and throw a punch. Boom! The air suddenly burst, and the Rain Shine Abyss in front didn't have any time to escape and got directly killed by Naito's punch. Other Rain's Shine Abyss who seemed to be Jonin, had already a very high understanding of Naito's ability, which made them avoid his attack. Naito's ability currently is no longer a secret in the world. They all understood how much power his shocks are, which made several villages carefully study the power of shocks. The Rain Village is no exception. Looking at the power of Naito's punch, Hanzo carefully avoided his attack. He bit his finger, then he printed a hand sign, and pressed his hand to the ground. Summoning technique. Puff. The white smoke appeared, and a huge poisonous salamander appeared. Hanzo was standing above its head overlooking at Naito. Upon seeing this, Tsunade didn't hesitate, and she immediately threw a bunch of small bottles to Jiraiya, Naito, and Orochimaru. When you drink the white bottle, you will be immune for poison, but there's a time limit. If you get poisoned, inject the red one into your body. Tsunade was really prepared for this battle. After they took the potions, the three of them put it in their pockets, then they all looked at Hanzo. It's obvious that Hanzo didn't predict that. He never thought that Xuandi will be able to crack his poison. But even so, Hanzo's expression was calm, because even the medicine has a time limit. As long as he plays his poison card carefully, these antidotes will never be useful for them. Jiraiya, Naito, and Orochimaru didn't drink the antidotes directly, they hid it then looked at Hanzo. These four wasn't only powerful, they were also very smart ninjas. Water release, water dragon technique. At the next moment, Hanzo launched his first attack, while printing hand sings so fast, he leached his attack toward them in no time. Whoosh! The dragon water was a good technique, but being cast by Hanzo the power of the ninjutsu got enhanced magnificently. The power of the technique was almost close to the S-rank level, the water was flowing in the sky like a storm, it looked unstoppable. In a second, Tsunade and Jiraiya managed to fell back immediately and escaped from the range of the technique. While Naito stood in his place, he grabbed his Kusanagi sword and jumped toward the dragon water, then waved his sword. Naito teamed up with the three Sannin against Hanzo, and the battle already start heating. Just when Naito was having a fierce battle against Hanzo along with the three legendary Sannin, there was some movement around the battlefield. In one direction, three people were alerted by the loud sounds of the battle on the other side. When they approached the battlefield, two of them were so shocked. It's Nashio-sensei. The three people were Yoriko, Kanon, and Nagato was the third person. He was hiding behind the back of these two after he saw the battlefield. During this time, Kanon and Yoriko were wandering around the rain country, hiding from the rock and sand. Although they were slightly strong, they couldn't cross the rain country and escape that easily. They were forced to leave many times. Eventually, after they get forced to leave time after time, the two met Nagato, and the last joined them. While they were wandering in the rain country, Yoriko and Kanon heard about Naito many times. After all, the nickname of Konoha's Ashura was already famous. Neither of them thought that Naito, who was just a little bit older than them, to be this famous. Although the two of them didn't saw Naito for a long time, they often heard about him, so their respect and admiration of him didn't decrease. It's the rain leader Hanzo the Salamander. Yoriko looked at the other side, and with one glance he immediately recognized Hanzo's identity. Hearing this sentence, Kanon immediately looked at him, and suddenly, she showed a hint of worry. Hanzo was so famous at that time, everyone knew how strong he was. Even though Naito was as famous as him, it seemed to be dangerous to fight against someone like Hanzo. Yoriko looked at the battlefield and couldn't help but say, Naito-sensei is very strong, but Hanzo is standing on the top of the world of ninjas. This battle may be a little bit too much. We need to think of a way to stop it. Kanon shook her head then said, we can't stop this kind of battle. With a little worried expression on her beautiful face, she couldn't help but whisper, we can only pray for Sensei's safety. At the other side of the battlefield, the three of them didn't notice that someone was staring at them. It was a white figure hidden behind the rocks. This is really interesting, Nagato has actually come here, I should report this event back to Madara. Staring at the battlefield and at the side where the three of them were hiding, Zetsu whispered these words. He actually didn't care about Kanon and Yoriko, the only person he cared about was Nagato. After all, the Rinnegan was a very important part of Madara's plan. Of course, Zetsu had a plan on his own. If Madara suddenly decided to not cooperate, he will just use Nagato. Kanan and two other were hiding in the dark spying on the battle, while Zetsu was secretly observing the battlefield and Nagato. At this moment in the battlefield, the battle started to heat even more. Crawling explosive scrolls technique. Hanzo suddenly moved his hands so fast, printing hand signs. Whoosh! In an instant, explosive tags appeared suddenly from the ground and wrapped Orochimaru's body. Upon seeing this, Orochimaru didn't hesitate and opened his mouth directly. Suddenly, another figure of him opened its way out of his mouth and escaped. Boom! The explosive tags suddenly exploded. He was still slightly hit by the horrible explosion and got slightly injured. Orochimaru's expression suddenly became really cold, and started to reveal a crazy killing intent. After he cast that explosive tag technique, Hanzo rushed toward Jiraiya, then he caught him with a chain. At the end of that chain there was a huge sickle. Hidden needle. Jiraiya didn't hesitate, he quickly fell back, then he bowed. Brush. His hair curled up, and suddenly thousands of needles were shouted at Hanzo, turning him to a kind of a sieve. However, Hanzo's body suddenly turned into a pile of rocks. It's a rock clone. Not good. Jiraiya was shocked by this move. He was still very young after all, and he didn't even know Hanzo's strength at the time. At the next moment, Hanzo's figure suddenly appeared behind Jiraiya and waved his Kusarigame at him. At that time, it was too late for Jiraiya to cast any ninjutsu, so he tried to avoid Hanzo's strike from the side, but he ended up being slightly injured by the end of the sickle. Sru. Die. Just as Hanzo was about to continue his attack, and kill Jiraiya, Tsunade suddenly blinked at him and tried to crush him with a punch. What? Hanzo got slightly surprised. He didn't expect this woman to have this kind of strength. At first, he thought she was just an ordinary medical ninja. However, Hanzo was as strong as a Hokage, and such an attack wouldn't be a threat from him. Whether it was his chakra or his physical strength, Hanzo's power was at the level of a Hokage, and he could easily avoid her attack. With one move he dodged her punch and kicked her. Tsunade was slightly shocked. She didn't expect Hanzo to dodge her attack and even have time backfire her. She couldn't dodge that kick, she only had time to protect herself by putting one hand against her upper body. Boom! Suddenly, Hanzo sent Tsunade flying in the air, then he threw his Kusarigame at her. The chain started dancing at air, while the sickle at the end of the chain went directly toward her body, and it seemed like it was over for Tsunade. In just a few seconds, Hanzo alone managed to defeat the three of them. What does it mean to be called a demigod? Just when the sickle was about to cut Tsunade's body into two halves, a figure flashed and appeared in front of her. It was Naito. Ding! Naito's Kusanagi sword fell, and suddenly it collided with the sickle and stopped it. It didn't break. Looking at the sickle and how it didn't break from Naito's strike, Naito suddenly got surprised. It seems that this sickle is also made from a great material, otherwise, it would have been broke from Naito's attack. It should have been cut into two halves if it was any other weapon. Hanzo pulled back the chain and grabbed the Kusarigame with his hand, then he suddenly wrinkled. Although it was only a normal attack, yet it still surprised him to see his Kusarigame got blocked. This sword. It's a Kusanagi sword. He couldn't help but stare at Naito. Hanzo's eyes revealed a strange color, but it wasn't out of fear. After he held his Kusarigame, he suddenly rushed toward Naito. Whoosh! Hanzo's chakra was creating a very sharp edge at the end of the sickle. His chakra was even stronger than Sakumo. Originally, his Kusarigame was made by the samurais of the Iron Country, even Sakumo's sword was made from the knowledge of the Iron Country samurais. The sharp edge of the sickle was heading toward Naito's head, and it looked like it has the power to cut through the sky. Shit! Seeing this scene, Tsunade was standing behind Naito, but she was very shocked to react and help him. Standing behind him will only drag. So she could only avoid it. On the other side, both Orochimaru and Jiraiya, after that last clash, the two of them were still lacking focus. In front of this attack, only Naito with his sharp mind and high spirit was ready to fight back. Naito's full power shock has almost reached the S-class ninjutsu level. His shock waves were slowly becoming stronger than the regular shocks, but it was also on the verge of the S-class ninjutsu. How Hanzo will handle such a power? Shock. Cut. In the next moment, with both hands, Naito waved his Kusanagi sword so hard, and the shock wave flew cutting the air. If it were any regular weapon, it wouldn't withstand such power. Crack. Naito waved his sword and stopped both the sickle and Hanzo in the air. Boom. For a moment, it seemed like two meteors have crashed into each other in the middle of the sky, crushing both heavens and earth. The ground behind Naito started to crack, and instantly those cracks spread out to the distance. At the same time, Hanzo got froze in midair by the power of the clash, while the Kusanagi sword started to cut through his sickle. The shock started to spread away, and under the gaze of all people, the sky itself started cracking and trembling. Crack. Under the intense clash of the two, it appeared that Naito's strength was slightly weaker than Hanzo's, but the Kusanagi sword was much stronger than the sickle. And this is where the worth of the Kusanagi sword has been proved when it cut the sickle nearly into two halves. Seeing this scene, Hanzo got surprised, and he immediately revealed a hint of jealousy. Then he suddenly pulled back his Kusarigame and fell back. After all, it seems that among the four of them Konoha's Ashura is the strongest. Whoosh! The moment he fell back, Orochimaru and Tsunade attacked him from both sides, and Jiraiya surrounded him from the third direction. At this moment, Naito was still a little bit numbed from the clash of the two weapons, but his body was too strong, so it got recovered in a second. He held his sword with two hands, then he raised it up to the sky. The four of them surrounded Hanzo in the middle, then they moved all together to attack. However, in the next moment, with one hand Hanzo printed a hand sign, then his body disappeared into the ground instantly. Bang! They all targeted their attacks at the ground where he disappeared, making a big hole. Just when they were approaching the big hole to see where Hanzo was hiding, they felt a very horrible chakra flowing. Suddenly, a huge monster came out and opened its mouth, spreading a horrible purple poisonous mist in the air. Not good. Retreat. Even though Tsunade has already made an antidote for that poison, they shouldn't be very comfortable around it. No one wants to get poisoned. Just as Orochimaru and three of them fell back, Naito looked coldly at that poisonous salamander in front of him, then jumped in the sky and slammed it down. If you think you can stay forever underground, think about it again. Boom! The poisonous mist that hasn't been spread yet got shocked by Naito's blow and stopped spreading. The salamander instinct felt the danger, but it was too late for him to drill back into the ground. The turbulent force of Naito crashed both his body and the ground. The poison also got shattered by the shock force and faded away in the air. Seeing this scene, Orochimaru and Jiraiya felt very terrified, even Tsunade looked very shocked. Naito is indeed a scary guy. No matter what kind of attack you threw at him, his power of shocks will shatter anything and everything, leaving nothing. Even if it's a poisonous mist, he will only need to throw up a punch to stop it. Whoosh! Just when Orochimaru was slightly stunned by this scene, Hanzo appeared suddenly behind the Jiraiya's back, while his eyes flashed with murderous intent. He never thought that his salamander will be killed in such a simple way by Naito. It's really too simple to die in front of this guy. With the Kusarigame in his hands, Hanzo struck Jiraiya from above. It was too late to turn around. With both hands Jiraiya blocked the sickle from behind, but it was too much for him, and he could hardly stop it from cutting his head. Even so, the horrible power of that strike put a lot of burden on his legs that were standing on a muddy ground. There were some dense cracks on the ground, and that was proof of the terrifying power that strike had. Crack! Just when Jiraiya was about to give, he heard a soft sound of cracking. Suddenly, the cracks on the sickle start to spread. Fortunately, due to the last clash he had with Naito, the sickle couldn't withstand this enormous power and broke into two halves. Even if the first clash didn't break it, the second with Jiraiya sure made the work. The broken half of the sickle fell so hard on the ground, while the other half was still in Hanzo's hands. This scene made the cold sweat appear on Jiraiya's forehead. This was very close. If the sickle didn't take that hit from Naito's sword before, Jiraiya would have been dead by now. What? Hanzo looked at his broken Kusarigame, then he frowned. He thought that this was the end. This course of events happened because of Naito. After experiencing this moment of close death, Jiraiya's forehead was full of cold sweat, and he directly fell back and escaped from Hanzo. The three of them looked at each other in despair. They knew that they weren't worthy to face Hanzo. If Naito weren't here, they would have been crushed so easily by Hanzo. Hanzo threw the broke Kusarigame on the ground, then he took a deep breath and shouted, "You four are very strong, even beyond my expectations. I've been called a demigod for so many years now. Believe me, this title is not just for show." In the original story, the three legendary Sannin could barely handle Hanzo for some time. He had the upper hand, but he let go of the three of them because he didn't want to go in a big conflict with Konoha. But this is a different case. It's not because his Kusarigame got broke, or because his poison got shattered, but also because of the jealousy and fear he felt in his heart. For that Hanzo decided to kill all the four of them. In the original story, Hanzo wasn't afraid to let the three of them go, because even if they grew and went even stronger, Hanzo was still confident he would be able to kill them. After all, he's the man who was considered as a demigod. However, Naito is different from these three. Naito is already putting pressure on Hanzo. Perhaps this is his last chance for him to kill Naito before he gets any stronger, because once that happens, there won't be any man in this world who will be able to stop Naito. Fire release, Fire Dragon Bomb. At the next moment, Hanzo suddenly rushed toward Orochimaru. He printed some hand signs very quickly, then he cast his technique at him. Hanzo took off his mask, and suddenly a very horrifying fire dragon rushed toward Orochimaru. Orochimaru printed a hand sign, then he pressed his hand into the ground. Triple Rashomon. Three huge iron gates suddenly rose from the ground in front of Orochimaru and blocked the fire dragon. Boom! The fire dragon suddenly hit the first gate. It broke it, then it hit the second. Unfortunately, even the third one didn't stop it, but it weakened it. There is no doubt was an extremely powerful A-class ninjatus, and its power is almost close to the S-class. The triple Rashomon didn't block it, and his whole body got surrounded by the flames. Fortunately, Orochimaru's body was strong and could withstand the fire. Even the injury was light one. Orochimaru's skin was very special, and he took advantage of that to ease the flames. After he released the fire ninjutsu at Orochimaru, Hanzo didn't put his mask back. He rushed toward Jiraiya, then he spurted a powerful poisonous mist, which forced him to retreat. Tsunade wanted to find an opportunity to attack Hanzo, but she couldn't even surprise him from his other side, because Hanzo had an extreme sense of his surrounding. She was afraid if she rushed at him, she would be seriously injured or even dead. Hanzo once again showed his real strength, and he could easily stop the three of them. At this time, Naito's attack finally arrived. Boom! The whole place started shaking, and even rain stopped in midair. Naito just threw an all-out punch. Even though he was far away from Hanzo, the horrible force of the shock could easily reach him. Earth Release, Rock Wall. This is an enhanced form of the regular rock wall, and because it was cast by Hanzo, it was an A-class ninjutsu. Bang! A thick wall rock rose from the ground and blocked the course of the shock force. Crack! The impact of the shock force on the rock wall was powerful, and it started to make very thick cracks on its surface. In the end, the rock wall got destroyed by Naito's shock force. With just a punch he made this much power. This power is really tricky. Hanzo looked at this scene, then he faced Naito and revealed a very cold murderous stare. Hanzo could easily let go of the three legendary Sannin before because knew he can always stop them whenever he wanted. However, if he felt threatened by the person in front of him, he will never feel eased unless he kills him for good. Is it just tricky? Naito looked at Hanzo, then with his two hands, he grabbed his sword, then kicked the ground so hard. Boom! The ground suddenly cracked open, then Naito's figure flashed so fast and came in front of Hanzo. So fast! This was the first time for Hanzo to witness the real speed of Naito, and it was even faster than Tsunade. With one hand Hanzo printed a hand sign, then he instantly disappeared. After hitting the ground with his sword, Naito didn't stop and rushed again looking for Hanzo. Hanzo once again appeared in the distance, and in a second, he cast another A-class ninjutsu at Naito. However, with a powerful wave of his sword, Naito destroyed that ninjutsu and rushed toward Hanzo very fast. At this time, the gap between Naito and the other three was very clear. It was even hard for Orochimaru to face Hanzo. Naito's strength now is indeed very close to a Hokage level. Among the three legendary Sannin, even the strongest Orochimaru couldn't do anything but assisting Naito. He wasn't qualified to be a strong side in this battle. Gradually, after this battle really got fierce, whether it was Orochimaru or the other two, they knew that they weren't the main parts of this battle. All that they could do is to believe in Naito, assist him, and disturb Hanzo to open an opportunity for Naito to attack him. After they found the best way to join their forces, the three of them along with Naito finally gained the upper hand. In the beginning, Hanzo could still counter-attack them, but now, the three of them managed to put some pressure on him, and if this continues victory will be no longer impossible. The weather was as rainy as ever. The battlefield had a sense of sorrow. Asking him to join them in this battle, the three legendary Sannin teamed up with Naito to fight Hanzo the Salamander. They were in a disadvantage at the beginning, but now things got heated up, and the battle became more fierce. The change of event that happened in this battle was because of the fact that one man who shouldn't be here has joined that battle. It was Naito. One person with one wave of his sword changed the whole destiny. Step by step, with every attack they start to put some pressure on Hanzo, which made him get more passive and defensive in this battle. It seems like they've already won. In the distance, Kanon, Yoriko, and Nagato were very shocked. Even if it was 4 versus 1, this one was Hanzo the demigod. This one of the strongest shinobis in the history, yet 4 people managed to put this much pressure on him, and even gradually made him lose the ability to fight back. What a shock! Kanon with her pretty face was looking at the battlefield, and especially at Naito and how he was beating up Hanzo while she was revealing a very admirable look. Naito-sensei. Maybe one day he will really gonna be the strongest in the world. Kanana believed in Naito from the bottom of her heart. On the other side, Zetsu, who was hiding in the dark, looked like he got slapped in the face, showing a very amazed expression. He's for sure is the man who knows everything that is happening in this world, and it's a fact for him that Hanzo is the strongest man alive. Strong. Absolutely strong. Even the third Hokage wouldn't be able to stand against Hanzo in a 1 versus 1 battle. The demigod nickname is not just for show. However, this person is being pushed back to the verge of death. Although Hanzo still didn't have any kind of serious injuries, yet he was losing. This is incredible. The 4 of them are really crushing Hanzo, although they have antidotes, yet Hanzo's strength doesn't rely on his poison only. Zetsu looked at the battlefield, then he shook his head and said, "No, the reason behind this is Konoha's Ashura. Without him, even if they had a whole squad of Jonin along with them, they wouldn't be able to defeat Hanzo. Wait, if they actually win, Yoriko, Kanon, and Nagato will meet with Konoha's Ashura, and these 3, in this case, the Rinnegan will fall into the hands of Konoha." The moment he thought about this, Zetsu's expression changed, and he didn't hesitate for a second to pass this information to Madara. And just when he decided this, the battle has finally come to an end. Boom! A roar of ground shattering, Hanzo crushed on the ground, and he spilled blood out of his mouth. On the opposite side, Orochimaru and the other didn't have any serious injuries, but they looked all exhausted as they were breathing hard, especially Jiraiya. He consumed a lot of chakra, and he was on the verge of collapsing. The battle was really tense. Even Naito with his strong physical power looked somehow tired, but it must be said that Hanzo was really strong. Naito wasn't able to kill him. This battle was the most difficult one up until now. But after all, Naito was winning. Although Hanzo did only suffer minor injuries, the situation in the battlefield was already obvious. Even if this is continued, he might be able to kill Orochimaru or Jiraiya, but in the end, he will also be killed. Although Naito was very famous and strong despite his young age, the 3 legendary Sannin weren't famous yet at that time. However, the 4 of them managed to defeat Hanzo, the one who was scaring the whole world. They pushed him this far, and this was enough for this to be called a victory. Standing next to Naito, Tsunade looked very excited. She didn't expect things to go this far against Hanzo. Originally, her idea was to drag Hanzo only for a short time. However, with Naito and the hard effort of the 3 of them, they managed to defeat Hanzo. Konoha. Sure enough, this village is the strongest one. With blood on the corner of his mouth, Hanzo was staring at Naito. He tried to kill him countless times, but every time Naito stopped him. He's not just powerful, but also extremely invincible. He's a genius. This was Hanzo's evaluation for Naito's strength. As for the other 3, they were also very good. They much better than average Jonin, otherwise, they would have been killed a long time ago. As for the Jonin squad that came along with the 4 of them after they defeated the Rain's troop, they joined the battle against Hanzo, but they were all killed one by the last in no time. They were just too weak to join such a battle. The 4 of you are very strong, even I couldn't defeat you. Rather than that, you 4 managed to defeat me. In the future, the world of Shinobi will inevitably call the 4 of you by a nickname. Especially you. Hanzo looked at Naito with a strange expression on his face. Konoha's Ashura, this title may have the ability to stand at the apex of the world. When he heard Hanzo's words, Naito got a little bit confused. What do you mean? I don't mean anything. This war doesn't have to continue anymore. Konoha won, and the four of you defeated me. And this is, even more, worse than being killed. With a very calm expression, Hanzo said these words, then he finally looked at Naito and printed a hand sign. Instant technique. Whoosh. Suddenly, Hanzo disappeared. Naito looked at Hanzo disappearing in front of his eyes, yet he didn't do anything but shaking his head. He wasn't afraid of Hanzo, nor he was afraid of continuing this battle. However, the three others were very exhausted, and if he chases Hanzo they will never leave his side, and this will only end with their death. Hanzo the Salamander. This guy is really strong. Naito put back his sword, with a slight sigh. With the defeat of Hanzo, the Second Shinobi World War has finally come to an end. It's very similar to what happened in the original story. The only difference is that the existence of Naito in this war made Konoha completely crush the other sides in this battle and declare itself to the whole world that as the strongest. With the end of this war, and the defeat of the Rain, there will be a long-term local battle for several years. These conflicts will gradually slow down, then it will get tenser again, and finally, the Third War will break. The Shinobi Third World War, in fact, can be regarded as a continuation of the second. Of course, after all, he's the demigod. After she saw Hanzo leaving the battlefield, Tsuna took a deep breath, and finally felt relieved. After this whole time, the battle in the frontal line should be already over. It's really unbelievable to say it, but we actually defeated Hanzo. After Jiraiya took a few breaths, he gradually calmed down. Orochimaru pointed with his hand at Naito then said, "This is all thanks to Naito, only you managed to block Hanzo's attacks." Speaking of this, Orochimaru smirked, then with a strange color in his eyes, he looked at Naito and said, "But I still think that you would have defeated him if this battle continued." Naito shook his head then said, "No, it couldn't be this easy." On the other side, Jiraiya listened to both Naito and Orochimaru talking, and couldn't help but smile. "You're really strong, Naito, you already reached a very high level of strength. It won't be long before you reach Hanzo's level, it might even be in your 20s. 20 to 30 years old is the general time for a person to reach his peak. In general, the fastest period of growth is between the age of 10 to 16. It's a rare case to find someone like Kakashi who start his growth at the age of 5 years old. 20 years old. When Naito heard these words, he didn't say anything, but he shook his head. Uchiha Itachi activated his Sharingan at the age of 13, and when he opened the main Gekyu, he reached the level of Hokage immediately. For Naito, opening the fourth gate will give him much more power, which will make him reach the level of Hokage. Speaking of it, it won't take long before the Third War broke, therefore, Naito needs to be even stronger. The Second World War is actually the weakest in terms of strength than the other three. In the Third War, there will be the Third Hokage, one of the strongest shinobis in the history. Fighting against this guy will need much more power. Nashio's strength currently is more than enough for the Second War, but in the future, he will need to be much more powerful. In order to become stronger, Naito will need to open the fourth, the fifth, and even the sixth of the reverse Hakimon Tenku. Hanzo the Salamander got defeated. Yoriko couldn't believe it. Kanan, who was beside him, nodded, and with a bit of exclamation, then she said, "Naito-sensei won. Do we go out now?" Yoriko looked at Orochimaru and the other two with Naito, then he hesitated a little bit. Naito is okay, but Orochimaru looked very scary, and the other two doesn't look like good guys too. Is it okay to go there? Kanan slightly hesitated too. She smiled, then looked at Yoriko, and said, Naito-sensei is with them, so it should be fine, let's go. Yes. When Yoriko heard Kanan's words, he nodded and felt relieved. Yes, Naito is there. Even if Konoha's Shinobis look a little bit scary, they won't be able to do anything for them in his presence. Nagato, let's go together, you're gonna meet Naito-sensei. Oh. Nagato replayed with a very shaky tone, while there was a slight fear in his heart. He also remembers clearly the day when his parents got killed by a ninja, who had the same symbol on his forehead protector. Yoriko and Kanan didn't know the past of Nagato. Both of them stood up and walked toward Naito's direction. Nagato extended his hand and wanted to stop them, but he didn't know how. He didn't want to be left over, but he also didn't want to go. Under constant hesitation, his heart sunk more and more into chaos. In a hidden place underground, Uchiha Madara was still in there waiting. Madara, Naito and the Shinobis from Konoha defeated Hanzo. Yes, it looks like that little devil is, even more, stronger than what we expected. Madara slightly raised his head, and there was a rare worried expression on his face. But it wasn't the end of the world, so what if he managed to defeat Hanzo? This changes nothing. It's like two kind of ants fighting against each other. Even if they defeated the Queen of Ants, that doesn't mean that they will be able to conquer the world after that. There's one more thing, Nagato was also there, and he will meet Naito soon. What should we do? What? Upon hearing this news, Madara frowned. He wanted to say that everything will be okay, but this wasn't the case. Naito was getting stronger, and his actions are somehow unpredictable. Madara kept quiet for a long time, while he had a very strange expression. Prevent him from meeting that little devil, he might interfere with our plan. Madara said that with a tone that seemed very strict, then he closed his eyes. Uchiha's eyes at this time didn't have the Rinnegan, he had the normal Sharingan because he transferred them to Nagato. However, even the Sharingan is very strong. Whoom. Suddenly, Madara opened his eyes, and the three Tomo shined. Although they were only normal Sharingan, they looked even stronger than a Mangekyo. Even though he transferred his Rinnegan to Nagato, Madara had still some of the Six Paths power. This power seemed to ignore the fact that he no longer has the Rinnegan, and stuck to his Sharingan. The Rain Country. After they defeated Hanzo, Naito and the others wandered around the battlefield. Even though they won, the scene looked very terrifying. They almost lost the whole squad of Jonin that they brought with them, and the entire Rain troop got also destroyed. Most of the Konoha's ninjas who died weren't killed by the Rain's troop, they all got killed by Hanzo. They were too weak to be part of this battle. Naito and the three legendary Sannin couldn't stop Hanzo from killing every single one of them. They could protect them for a while, but it was impossible to defend them for the whole time. They're all dead. Jiraiya looked at the blood river, then he took a deep breath. At this time, Orochimaru's eyes flashed, then he said, "No, they're not all dead." What? Jiraiya was slightly surprised to hear Orochimaru's words. Orochimaru turned and looked at the other direction. There's still few people hiding there. At the next moment, Orochimaru was ready to attack anything that moves. Suddenly, Naito reached Orochimaru and stopped him. No need. After he stopped Orochimaru, Naito looked a little bit surprised. It's Kanan and Yoriko. Although his ability to sense people's chakra wasn't as strong as Orochimaru, Naito could easily feel the presence of these two. Is it fate? Or is something else? After all, here it is again, he got reunited again with them. in the most unpredictable place, but obviously, it didn't have anything to do with Jiraiya's presence. They are his own disciples. After he shook his head, Naito took a few steps forward, then smiled, looking at Yoriko and Kanon, who were running toward him. Long time no see, Yoriko, Kanon. Naito-sensei. Kanon and Yoriko finally reached Naito, and the look on their face was full of admiration. After they watched their sensei defeating Hanzo the Salamander, there's no way that they wouldn't have admiration for him in their hearts. Tsunade looked a little bit surprised to see the two of them. She turned and looked at Naito and said, "When did you accept these two as your disciples? And it seems that these two children are from the Rain Country." "Yes." Naito nodded. Then he smiled at Tsunade, who was revealing a very strong killing intent at the two of them. "They are orphans. I encountered them when I was performing a mission. I was undercover at the time, so I lived with them for a while." "Why didn't say anything about this before?" Tsunade walked toward Naito, while she was looking at Kanon and Yoriko, and couldn't help but feel strange. It wasn't because of the young age of Nashio. With the strength of Naito, it was very reasonable for him to take some disciples. The strange thing is that he took these two as his disciples. They looked very ordinary, their chakra was very weak, and they were at best in the level of a Chunin. How can Naito suddenly accept them as his disciples? Moreover, why did he choose two kids from the Rain to teach them? He could pick any other kid from Konoha, because, in the case of Kanon and Yoriko, Tsunade really couldn't see any difference. "I didn't say anything, because I didn't know if I will be able to see them again in the future, and they weren't even from Konoha." Nashio tried to explain. However, Tsunade still didn't get convinced by his words. She wanted to ask him more. At the same time, Nagato was walking slowly toward them while looking a little bit hesitated. Orochimaru was standing beside them, but he didn't get a part in this conversation. He just fought Hanzo. He was too tired even to talk. But this was different. Even Tsunade felt strange about seeing Naito taking Yoriko and Kanon as his disciples. Orochimaru started to feel a little bit suspicious. In a second, he looked at the two of them, but he didn't notice anything. Then he looked at Nagato in the distance. Since Yoriko and Kanon looked fine, the third should be the problem. Do you ever saw Orochimaru's eyes? A glance from those evil eyes can make the heart tremble. His sharp evil eyes fell at Nagato. Suddenly his whole body started shaking, and his Rinnegan started glowing. Jiraiya was about to take a closer look at Nagato. Suddenly he felt an extraordinary power coming from him. He took a few steps back, with a shocking expression on his face. "What is that?" At that moment, Orochimaru felt a very horrible killing intent coming from Nagato. In front of him, he felt like he himself was like an ant. Yoriko didn't notice any of that. He slowly walked toward him. He shook his head, then he stopped near him. "Right, he's called Nagato. We met him a few days ago." Yoriko was ready to talk about Nagato and introduce him to Naito, but before he finishes, Naito's expression changed. At this moment, Nagato's killing intent raised even more, then his aura suddenly roared in all directions. Crack! The ground started cracking under this strong momentum, and his red hair started floating, showing his eyes. The Rinnegan eyes. Uuuh. It seemed like Nagato has already lost conscious, and he was in some kind of a madness state. Orochimaru's eyes made Nagato remember the past. His heart sunk in fear, and he started to panic until he lost his conscience. At this time, he was no longer controlling his power, and his eyes flashed with madness, trying to protect him from the danger he felt. Crack! This was the power of the Six Paths himself. Even Orochimaru and the others could feel its power. Impossible. These eyes. The Rinnegan. Both Orochimaru and Jiraiya felt shocked, and they recognized his eyes almost instantly. At this time, even Orochimaru couldn't maintain his calm and start breathing hard. Perhaps Jiraiya was more shocked from the look on Orochimaru's face. The former never lost his calm in front of Jiraiya. Moreover, compared to Jiraiya, Orochimaru knew better what were these eyes, and what kind of power it had. This is the power of the Sixth Path. Almost at the next moment, Orochimaru rushed toward Nagato. Wait. Stop. Tsunade and Jiraiya were still shocked. When the two of them saw Orochimaru's action, they wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Naito could easily stop him, but seeing Nagato's state, Naito frowned, and with a strange expression on his face, he let Orochimaru go. Whoosh! A few big snakes came out from Orochimaru's hand and rushed toward Nagato while they were opening their mouth ready to eat him alive. At this time, Nagato suddenly burst a violent force. Shinra Tensei. Boom! The ground around him started trembling, and some kind of a shock that was visible to the naked eyes suddenly exploded out from Nagato's body, roaring in all directions. The ground didn't crack, but it got destroyed directly. A horrible deep pit started to appear, and in an instant, it continued on spreading. Under this kind of power, anyone and everyone should escape. Orochimaru's attack got directly destroyed by the Shinra Tensei's power. Not good. Orochimaru revealed a hint of horror. He immediately understood how powerful the Rinnegan, and without any hesitation, he escaped. At the same time, both Tsunade and Jiraiya's expressions changed, then they fell back. Naito stopped for a moment, then looked at Nagato. This was strange for Naito because Nagato shouldn't be able to control this kind of power. It's very likely that this is just some kind of burst power broke when he panicked and lost his conscious, but still, it was very weird. Retreat. At the next moment, Naito grabbed Yoriko's collar from the back, and at the same time, he picked up Kanon with the other and rushed very fast away from that force. The Shinra Tensei's force spread in all directions. Because it was pouring, the force was apparent as it was literally destroying everything on its way. At this moment, Naito was very sure that Nagato has lost his mind, or he is being manipulated. Nagato suddenly stopped, and suddenly there was a very cold stare in his eyes. Those eyes looked like they were able to end the world. Looking at those eyes, Naito finally understood that Nagato wasn't in an unconscious state, otherwise, he would never stop his technique, and surely he will never reveal this kind of stare. But even if it's not an unconscious state, it was very obvious that this wasn't Nagato's conscious. There's no doubt Nagato is being controlled. This kind of gaze and momentum. It's Madara. Naito was slightly amazed. Uchiha Madara is even able to put Nagato under genjutsu and manipulate him from a very far distance. Uchiha Madara, this man is really the strongest shinobi. But if the plan to make Nagato in the future revives him from the dead didn't work, do you think this will stop him? The answer is definitely no. This man is capable of doing anything, and nothing will stop him. Even if the Rinnegan plan didn't work, he will definitely find something else. Naito-sensei. This was the voice of Yoriko calling Naito after he threw him far away, while he was holding Kanon. After all, it was too rude to throw a girl away. Don't worry. Naito put Kanon on the ground, then he looked at Nagato in the distance. Kanon had a cute little blush on her cheeks. After he put her on the ground, she didn't speak and looked at Nagato. At the same time, she looked a little bit worried. Nagato, she could no longer recognize him, he was very different. On the other side, Yoriko was looking at Nagato in a great shock. he never knew that Nagato had such power. Naito-sensei, Nagato is. You go back first, I'll deal with him. Nashio interrupted Yoriko without looking back at him, his tone was very strict. Both Kanon and Yoriko nodded, and the two retreated immediately, at the same they were worried about both Naito and Nagato. How did things suddenly come this far? Is this the power of Rinnegan? Jiraiya looked very terrified. The scene when the Shinra Tensei power destroyed everything around Nagato, made him reveal a terrified expression. Orochimaru on the other side also looked very shocked. This kind of power. He's not even qualified to face it. In the other side, Nagato was staring at the three of them with a very terrifying look. He looked at Orochimaru first, but then he looked like he wasn't even interested in looking at him, then his eyes fell on Naito's figure. Whoosh! In an instant, a very strong pressure burst out. This wasn't some kind of a technique or chakra flowing, it was just his aura. Boom! In an instant, the ground under Naito's feet cracked open. Naito looked like he was gonna fall just from that pressure. Very strong. Naito didn't help but admire this power. But I won't lose to you. Boom! At the next moment, without even moving a finger, Naito revealed his aura. His momentum raised, and the whole place started shaking and trembling. Crack! The ground under Naito's foot started cracking, his horrible killing intent was spreading all over the place, and the dark clouds began to fill the sky. The rain around Naito was shattering and floating in midair as if the time and space were stopped. Without a trace of fear, Naito looked straight at Nagato's eyes. Although he was stronger than Naito, Madara himself wasn't here, he was only manipulating Nagato from a long distance. Under the full momentum of Naito, he started to suppress Madara's. At this moment, Madara finally was a little bit surprised. This kind of spirit. Even when he heard that Nashio defeated Hanzo the Salamander, Madara wasn't surprised. Because in his opinion, Hanzo was only another weakling. But now, when he felt Naito's strong spirit and momentum, and how he looked like he wasn't afraid of him, or anything, he made him somehow see the Hakirama's shadow behind him. Suddenly Nagato's eyes looked gloomy, and he retracted his hand out toward Naito. Bansho Tenin. Whoosh! An unstoppable force suddenly attracted Naito's body toward Nagato. You Naito! Be careful! Both Jiraiya and Tsunade looked very shocked, they didn't know anything about the Rinnegan, and they couldn't do anything to help Naito. For someone who was attracted by the Bansho Tenin, Naito looked very calm, since he was very familiar with Pain's 6 paths. As long as Uchiha Madara himself is not the person who's using the Rinnegan, Naito wasn't afraid to face it. Although the Rinnegan is strong, it's not impossible to defeat it. When Naito's figure got attracted toward Nagato and almost got caught by him, Naito finally clenched his fist so hard and threw a punch toward him. Boom! The power of the shock was very strong and terrifying. What? Madara naturally didn't expect Naito to be able to do anything after he got attracted by the Bansho Tenin. However, Madara's heart seemed indifferent, facing the horrible shocks that were able to tear everything. Madara was as calm as ever. Controlling Nagato, he used another path of the Rinnegan power. Gekido. Whoom. Suddenly the shocks that were heading toward Nagato got absorbed by the Gekido technique. However, Naito also didn't show the slightest of a surprise, on the contrary, Naito smirked. It's true that Naito is also using chakra along with his power of the fruit, but it was only a small amount of chakra. His shocks are not simply chakra. Absorbing the chakra can only weaken the power of the shock, but it won't completely wipe out. Boom! At the next moment, Nagato's expression suddenly changed. The Gekido couldn't absorb the whole power of the shock, and suddenly it hit him. Shit! Madara got shocked. This time it was indeed beyond his expectations. Even if it was the dust release, the Gekido should be able to absorb it. But this strange power of Naito cannot be absorbed. Shinra Tensei. The power of the shock has already hit Nagato's power. Madara could only force the ability of the Shinra Tensei to ease the impact. Boom! This was a direct clash between the shocks and the Rinnegan power, but the Shinra Tensei was used in a rush. And the power of the shock was already very close, and it was a full power one. Even though the Shinra Tensei is as strong as a Raisin Shuriken, which is an S-class technique, could Nagato young body be able to use such power? Boom! It looked like the earth and the heaven got crushed into each other. The clash of the two power made a powerful impact, and white light burst out, and it seemed like it's gonna shatter the space itself. The ground was shaking and trembling so hard that even the people around the place couldn't stay still. The whole ground around Naito and Nagato start cracking and shattering. But both of them stood still like rocks. Who's winning? Tsunade and the others looked very worried. After all, Naito was facing the Rinnegan, the power of the Sixth Path himself. The momentum was raised even higher, and the whole place was shattering. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya start to feel more worried. Finally, at the next moment, something changed. Teng teng. Naito suddenly took a few steps back. Naito-sensei. Naito-kun. Seeing this scene, Kanan and Yoriko along with Tsunade, couldn't help but shout his name. Did Naito lose against the Rinnegan? Just when they thought that Naito lost, their expression once again changed. When Naito took few steps back, at the next moment, he stood still, while Nagato spurted blood out of his mouth. Puff! Nagato looked somehow weird, and he was on the verge of falling down. He was barely standing, and there was no expression on his face. While he was controlling Nagato, Madara was a little bit surprised. He has the ability to fight against the Rinnegan. No, Nagato body is fragile, and he's not even using 1% of the true power of the Rinnegan. He shook his head, then he sighed slightly, but it was too early to call it over. In fact, even later in the future, when Nagato grows up he won't be able to use the whole power of the Rinnegan. Even in the original story, Nagato's body looked very weak at the late period of his life. His body simply wasn't enough to withstand the power of the Rinnegan. Only a body that has the same Hakirama's cells can withstand it. Under various reasons, even after he controlled Nagato's body to fight against Naito, Madara couldn't use the whole power of the Rinnegan. Madara looked at Naito through Nagato's eyes with a deep gaze, then he re-released the Shinra Tensei. Whoom! The power of the Shinra Tensei started to destroy everything on its way toward both Naito and Orochimaru. Orochimaru was trying to help the others to retreat, while Naito, who was in front, stood against it and took out his sword and suddenly struck it with his whole power and smashed it. However, while he was dealing with it, Nagato disappeared. He escaped. Naito looked at the ground and wanted to chase him, but finally, he only shook his head. Perhaps this is an excellent opportunity to win Nagato on their side, but it's also a very dangerous situation. No one knows the other cards that Madara could be hiding. The Rinnegan, it's very strong. Orochimaru looked at where Nagato was standing with a very strange color in his eyes. He was still shocked. I didn't expect these eyes to appear again. The world is really falling more and more into chaos. What does the appearance of these eyes mean? Jiraiya also took a deep breath, and his expression was as shocked as Orochimaru. Tsunade was looking with her beautiful eyes toward Naito. She didn't expect Naito to be able to block the power of the Rinnegan. He even looked stronger. This only made her more shocked. She knows what does the Rinnegan represents, and that is the power of the Sixth Path himself. Naito, you did it, you managed to block that power. She rushed toward Naito, while her tone was slightly revealing a trace of fear, because if he didn't, maybe they will be all buried alive by this time. The most dangerous moment they felt today wasn't when they fought against Hanzo, but it was this short moment. No, he couldn't use the full power of the Rinnegan. No, he couldn't even use half of its power. Naito shook his head, then he took back his Kusanagi sword, and then took a deep breath. He's still too weak. In the eyes of the whole power, the power of the four of them is enough to destroy the entire world after they managed to stop Hanzo. But Naito knew that it wasn't enough. If Nagato is able to pull out the whole power he has in the original, even the entire world wouldn't be able to stand against him. After this event, Madara will be watching Naito's every move. But Naito wasn't afraid because Madara was weak at the moment. He wouldn't be able to control Nagato time after time, so there was no need to be worried about him currently. But still, we're talking about Madara. Even if the whole world stood against Naito to kill him, the former would have no fear. But Uchiha Madara is a different case. It's time to open the fourth gate, otherwise, I will never be able to stand against the Rinnegan next time. No, the fourth won't be enough, I need to open the fifth or even the sixth. After this mumbling in his heart, Naito took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. At this time, Kanan and Yoriko at a distance came over to see Naito. Kanan was the one who saved Nagato after she found him starving to death, but she never expected that Nagato will bring such trouble to Naito. Naito-sensei, I'm very sorry, I didn't know this will happen. It's okay, it's not your fault. Naito shook his head gently. Although Yoriko didn't finish the story from before, Naito already knew what happened, and how they found him on the verge of the death and helped him. Of course, in fact, it was impossible for Nagato to die. Even if Yoriko and Kanan didn't show up, Zetsu who was spying at him would never let him die. That's it for this video, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me your recommendations in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.